all year long, I've prided our team and myself, and we go to the races, and we don't care about the championship. I wish I could say that that's our philosophy for this race, but it's not. We're here to beat one car.
The last half of the year, I've pretty consistently beat them, so I really see no problem with being able to do it this weekend.
There are the hunters and the fray. The hunter wears black, Mike Eddy, the number 88. The Fox, two-time champion Butch Miller in white, leads a merry chase to the championship from the first race of the season to the last. The hunters have been many, but none more relentless or determined than the master, Mike Eddy. For 17 races, half a year, and over 4,200 laps, it's been a war of black and white between the very forces of good and evil, some might say. And for racers, there's first place and no place. Go fast or go home. The hunters are closing in, and the Fox must turn to fight. But wait, there are other dogs spoiling for the fight who will have their day. It's a brawl in the fall for it all. Has used his full palette of colors to paint the hills in western Pennsylvania for the Jennerstown 400, the ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series Championship race. And Mother Nature has pitched in another perfect day for the fans who have come here to see a points battle so tight they can hear it squeaking from miles down the road. Hello again, everybody. I'm Brian Drever, along with my good friend Rob Albright, and we can hardly wait to get this one underway. We have waited all season long to crown a champion, and right now it's coming down to the final race of the season.
Well, it is unbelievable. Just 8 points separating Butch Miller and Mike Eddy in this championship chase. That's 2 finishing positions on the racetrack. They've both been models of consistency, Brian, all year long. I think Butch may have the edge in that he's been faster at more racetracks, but Mike's pit stop strategy has been absolutely flawless. It may come down to that. Butch Miller trying to become only the second ASA driver in history, Mark Martin was the other one, to lead the points championship from the first checkered flag to the last. It's going to be a gem.
We are looking forward to the start of this one. Lots of stories to tell, and of course many of them will be told by Ricochet Ralph Shaheen. He's down on pit road with the 2 men who would be champion.
7 times car number 88, the GM Goodwrench Pontiac, has claimed the American Speed Association's AC-Delco's Challenge Series Championship, and its driver is none other than Mike Eddy. Mike, you've done what you've had to do so far today. You're starting 3rd. What do you got to do to win this championship?
Well, it's real easy. I just got to beat Butch today. That's all it comes down to.
Well, that guy that he has to beat that he's talking about, Butch Miller, starts right behind him on the inside of row number 3. And, of course, he is driving the Ford Quality Care Thunderbird. What a battle. What a matchup. It's perfect marketing strategy for a championship fight, Butch. What do you got to do to hold off Mike Eddy?
You know, I really don't know. We've had a terrific year. We've done what I feel is almost everything right. Mike's just been excellent. I mean, whenever we do something right, he does it righter. So best thing we can do today is beat him.
Really, what it comes down to is that it has been 17 rounds of practice and 1 final race for the championship.
If the heavyweight title fight here is what a lot of people have come to see, we're not giving up anything when we take a look at the undercard. I mean, Rob Albright, the rookie battle this year has been unbelievable, and the 2 guys that have been waging war all season long are at it again.
And I happen to be a boxing fan. I guess if Mike Eddy and Butch Miller are the heavyweights, then Brian Reffner and Dave Sensiba are the welterweights. What I like about the welterweights is they wade into the center of the ring and they just duke it out till the final bell, and that's exactly what these 2 kids have done. I say kids, they're both racing veterans, but new to ASA this season. They have just matched each other for performance race after race after race. As a broadcaster, I'm supposed to be objective, but I have to admit sometimes I play favorites. In this case, there ain't no favorite. These are 2 great young men and very talented racers.
And they have the gloves off for this one. It's a bare-knuckle brawl. Down on pit road once again, Ralph Shaheen has cornered one of the guys who is the main contender for this rookie battle.
When these 2 rookies came into Jennerstown, the point differential was 22 points, but then Brian Reffner landed a roundhouse in qualifying claim the pole and an extra 5 points. It is now 17 points between you and Dave Sensiba. And you know what? There's 5 more points up for grabs if you lead a lap. Starting on the pole makes it easy to get the first lap led. How hard do you run it down into turn 1 with Bob Seneker alongside of you going for that 5 points?
Well, we're going to go as fast as we can to get that 5 points. It means a lot. You know, it's a long race. Every point's going to count, and there's no other race to make these points up. You know, if we're going to win this Rookie of the Year, it's got to be today. So we got to get out and make as many points as we can.
Now, the person leading the Pat Shower Rookie of the Year points is Dave Sensiba, as we've mentioned, and he is back there. See the third white car back down the line? The Lane Automotive machine of Dave Sensiba starts 9th.
And we will get this thing underway in just a matter of moments. It'll start with a bang. It'll end with a huge roar. The Pennsylvania 400 will become AC-Delco Challenge Series on Prime is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it wins, it works. By Mr. Goodwrench, the GM expert at participating GM dealerships. And by Super America. At Super America, we never stop. There's the hillsides in western Pennsylvania. One of the great parts about living in the Northeast is watching the seasons change and the colors that it brings. We're expecting a colorful and exciting race here, the Pennsylvania 400 at Jennerstown Speedway. Just east and a little north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. Down on pit road, we are waiting to get this one underway. And, of course, the honors belong to Ralph Shaheen and friends. Ralph?
Well, and friends is the key word there, Brian. We got Eric Wheeler here and his dad, Dave Wheeler, Executive Vice President of Wheeler Brothers, is going to get us underway. How about it?
Yeah. Gentlemen, start your engines.
The engines have fired and 38 cars will take the green flag here. 400 laps of racing on this racetrack. Just about 5/8 of a mile around, a little less than 3/4. We won't quibble over a few distances. Let's take a look at the starting field for this one.
In a relentless quest for Rookie of the Year, the structural transport Ford Thunderbird of Brian Reffner goes from the pole, and the leading qualifier through all of 1994, Bob Seneker in the Johnsonville Foods Lane Automotive Thunderbird.
What can we say about the awesome 88? Mike Eddy, 8 points away from his 8th ASA title in the Goodwrench Pontiac, alongside Gary St. Amant in the Wynn Sport City Ford Thunderbird. 6th on points, no shot at a title, but chance for a victory today.
Eddie's nemesis, Butch Miller, the Quality Care Port City Liberty Ford Thunderbird starts 5th, and the man who's been on a roll of late, Scott Hansen, most recent winner at Toledo in the APCO Hansen Motorsports Ford Thunderbird.
Steve Holtzhausen has a pair of wins and can wrap up a top 5 finish for the season in the Wilson Phillips 66 Pontiac. Next to him on row 4 and 1 spot ahead in the points, Glenn Allen Jr. in the CarQuest Port City Pontiac, looking for win number 2.
Trying to slam the door on Brian Reffner, rookie points leader Dave Sensiba in the Lane Automotive Gage Motor Mall Chevrolet, and starting 10th, a good qualifying effort for Tony Raines in the ETR E&L Brokerage Cleanburn Chevrolet.
And a look at the rest of the starting grid. A.J. Cooper and Mike Miller, what a weekend he's had. He changed 2 engines, in between which he qualified on the 6th row. They had to put one in by hand last night in the number 18 car. Race number 18 for the car number 18. Maybe a little mojo working there for a guy who's had some bad luck lately.
And A.J. Cooper, by far the best qualifying performance of his young ASA career in his 2nd season with his sanctioning body. And Steve Mergic, a surprising qualifier in the top 14. Some 46 cars, Brian, made qualifying attempts yesterday.
And we will see a few new faces, or new cars, you might say. There's Eddie Sharp in the 50 car. That's
protege of Johnny Benson Jr., driving a car identical to the one that Benson drove to the championship in '93.
Cars circling the track right now, of course, waiting for the green flag to drop. Veteran Harold Fair back on row 8. Jeff Neal there on row 9. Here's Tom Jones, who won this race a year ago, and he was the spoiler a couple of years ago in a championship battle between Mike Eddy and Johnny Benson Jr.
And Jones won a 15-lap qualifying race yesterday in thrilling fashion by a bumper over Kent Stauffer, who will start from the inside of row number 11. Joe Knott there won the other 15-lap qualifying race. We're going to have more on that in a little bit.
We've got a lot of action getting ready to go. The fans are on their feet. This is the wave lap. The drivers waving out the windows, the fans waving back at them. Todd Forbes in the 07 car coming back from an injury. Ted Smokestad there on the 32 with a new sponsor this week. We'll talk more about them too.
Dr. Yale Conley, Tim Steele, who's indicated after winning the ARCA championship last year that he may come back and run full-time in ASA. A disappointing qualifying run for Brad Loney, who had mechanical gremlins yesterday. He's always a racer, though. He'll come toward the front solidly in the top 10 in points. And Bill Baird was impressive, the former dirt tracker, in his qualifying race yesterday.
Row 14, Rick Miller. That's 3 Millers in this race that we'll be trying to keep track of. And Larry Zen in the 05 car down there in row 15 alongside Bill Baird. As we take a look at the rest of the field, Tony Roper, we will show you what happened to Tony Roper and why he's driving a car that doesn't look at all like his usual black number 10. Dennis Lampman not having a very good day yesterday in qualifying either. This is sort of the back end of the field, the guys that are going to have to run to the front. And David Anspaugh, he's had an exciting qualifying race. Didn't count for much, but he's in the field again with another new sponsor on his car.
LA Luxury Vans coming on board for this weekend and hopefully for all of 1995. As we continue back through the field, 38 starters, Brian. That is the largest starting field in ASA history at Jennerstown Speedway. Russ Gamester was another driver who was fast in practice. Had some troubles in his qualifying race, battled for the lead earlier, got drop kicked to the rear of the field after sliding up out of the racing group. Here are the drivers that did not qualify. Leighton Reese, the road racing veteran, Larry Conroy, Brian Roach, a youngster that is a local racer here, failed to make the field. Also local driver Jim Seeger, who was trying to make the field in a team car to Tony Raines.
Alec Pinsino involved in a tangle-up that, again, we will show you a little bit later on with Tony Roper in one of the last chance qualifiers. Donnie Barco out of Canada, Glenn Galt, another local driver. These are guys that did not make this star-studded field for the ASA's final race of the season. Now, we promised you a look at what happened. Take a look at the number 10 car on the inside and the 93 of Alec Pinsino on the outside. Pinsino gets into the back of Roper, and here's what happened.
Well, you could see that Alec Pinsino had kissed the wall, literally nose at almost a 90-degree perpendicular angle to the racetrack. The front wheel's up on top of the wall. I don't know if we're going to stay with this long enough, but you and I watched it happen as we sat in the grandstands. Tony Roper, who's had an incredibly frustrating season, right after this, climbs out of his race car, and there he is the way he looks today. I started to say, climbed out of his car literally over the top and tried to get to Alec Pinsino. Now, whether he was going to show some anger or whether he was trying to help, maybe thinking that he was hurt. And this is Butch Miller's backup car. That is Tony Roper driving it from deep in the field today.
So there will be a pair of Liberty Ford Thunderbirds in the race, one wearing the familiar 52 for Butch Miller to drive in the number 10 car with Tony Roper at the wheel. Here it is. And it is a little over a half mile, 70 feet wide, plenty of room for side-by-side racing. We saw a lot of that in the qualifiers yesterday. 9 degrees in the turn, 6 degrees in the banking. It should make for some exciting action here to wrap up the 1994 season for the American Speed Association and the AC-Delco Challenge Series.
Brian, less than a lap from the green. That banking is progressive, meaning we have definite 2 grooves of racing. The contingency program, Chevrolet's money, $4,000 per race, hasn't been captured in 7 races, $28,000. Pontiac 8 for a win today. Also the same for Ford. Pontiac has clinched the Manufacturers Championship. Ford has locked up second, Chevrolet third, and we're coming out of turn 4 for a start.
Getting ready to go green, and, well, actually we thought we were, but now Roger Slack, the used-to-be teenager, and there comes the green flag out almost in a surprise fashion. Brian Refner in the number 5 car desperately hoping to lead this very first lap of the race. If he can do so, but Bob Seneker says no, pulls him to lead on the backstretch. Refner needs to lead a lap to get 5 very important points in his battle against Dave Sensiba. Now Refner trying to move through on the inside, can't make it stick. The Bluebird takes lap number 1 out of 400 and sets sail, as we have seen him do a few times late in this season so far.
We do expect through much of the afternoon to be true 2-groove racing around this racetrack. You can see Gary St. Amant, the bright orange nose on his Wins Ford Thunderbird, working the high side of Butch Miller in a battle for 4th position.
Well, Gary St. Amant quickly has become the victim of the battle between Butch Miller and Mike Eddy. We've got an incident over here in the turn 3-4 area. Tony Roper among 4 cars up against the wall. We're seeing some of them start to get moving right now. The 50 car coming down there, and that of first-time driver Eddie Sharp out of Concord, North Carolina. And he gets moving again. So we do have the first caution of the race on the 2nd lap, and that'll bunch things back up. Give Brian Refner a chance to take another run at Bob Seneker in the 84. Seneker stole the lead away from him going into the 2nd turn. Mike Eddy and Butch Miller making Gary St. Amant a victim and moving him back to the 5th spot on the racetrack as Mike Eddy sits 3rd. or rather Brian Refner sits second on the racetrack, Mike Eddy third, Butch Miller fourth, and let's take a look at what happened over here in turn 3.
And our position in the broadcast booth, we can't actually see turns 3 and 4. We're seeing it for the first time as you fans are. You can see Tom Jones trying to make tracks on the low side with that rookie, Eddie Sharp. The two of them bump. Sharp spins. Tom Harrington is collected. Car number 2, Kevin Sawinski, scrapes through, as does Russ Gamester in car number 46. And look at Randy Larson, I believe that is, scooting by on the high side in car number 02. And there's Tom Harrington already up against the wall in car number 91.
It was Carl James in the 8 car that was also parked up there alongside the wall. And as we take a look at Tony Roper heading for the infield to assess the damage, we're going to cut away from the action, or lack of it, at least right now, under caution, and give you a chance to catch your breath. We'll be right back. We counted off 5 laps while you were gone out of 400 scheduled here today at Jennerstown Speedway. 3 of them came under caution. Well, actually more than that. They finished 1 lap under green and then had an incident up in turn 3-4. Everybody's back rolling again, almost everybody at least. Actually, now that Tony Roper joins the back of the field, everybody's rolling again, and we're getting ready to go back to green. Roger Slack recently turned 20 years of age, the young flagman for the American Speed Association, getting ready to get these guys back underway as they've lined up single file behind Bob Seneker, who stole the lead on lap number 1.
And a report from the pits, just minor sheet metal, or should I say fiberglass damage to some body panels. Everybody able to continue here after that altercation.
You know, one thing, Rob, as we find ourselves in the last race of the season, I've been secretly hoping that we would have 1,000 cautions for 10 million laps, so that by the time this race is over, it'll be April, and we'll be able to start the season all over again with no interruption.
If that's the way we have to do it, I'll pass. You're a sick man, Drebber. Brian, I'm sorry, you're a sick man, Brian Drebber.
There we go.
Make sure you get the whole thing in there.
Bob Seneker on the point right now with Brian Refner trying him a little bit around the outside, and everybody else lined up single file. Mike Eddy and Butch Miller keeping a wary eye on one another. Eddie looking in the mirror, Butch Miller looking ahead to the black number 88, and everybody else nose to tail around the racetrack as they head for the finish line. Bob Seneker, who has qualified better than anyone all season long and more consistently than any driver in the American Speed Association, and it's no coincidence he also has the most victories of any driver in the history of this entire organization.
You can already see in the very early going a variety of lines being used by these drivers as they come off turn 4. Now watch them going down into turn number 1. Seneker seems to have a little bit of a push. Watch that car move up on the bank, and look at Refner. See, took a look at the low side. Gary St. Amant is using yet a higher line, and that is one of the beauties of this compound banking. As you go up the racetrack, the banking is a little steeper than it is down at the bottom.
Pole sitter Brian Refner wants desperately to lead a lap and pick up 5 easy points if he can, being so close to the front on the pole. You thought he would have been able to hold on for that first lap and get it. 17 points separate Brian Refner in the black number 5 from Dave Sensiba in the white number 4, about 8 spots back. And there, slowing on the inside, is Mike Miller in the number 18 car. It does not look like race number 18 will be the one for car number 18, Mike Miller. We had already mentioned at the top of the show that Mike changed 2 engines since yesterday's qualifying session. He had fast time for the first hour of qualifying, broke an engine, put another one in, qualified 12th, broke another engine, and had to change overnight. He had to take the 2 engines that were broken and make 1 out of 2, and looks like he's out of it. There's Dave Sensiba a little bit further back in the field behind Refner on the inside of the number 25 car of Tony Raines, and it's Sensiba who leads the points battle by 17, but trails Brian Refner by a handful of spots on the racetrack.
And those two started side by side at the drop of the green today. Sensiba started 9th. Tony Raines to his flank, the blue and white car number 25, started in 10th position. And look at them hammering on each other coming past the start-finish line. Neither one of these are really aggressive drivers in terms of having a reputation of hammering on people, Brian, but they're extremely evenly matched and giving neither, each is giving neither any quarter.
And they're providing a bit of a blockage there for number 1, Jay Sauter, who's right behind them. He was trying to figure out how to get around cars too wide, and now they've singled out. Tony Raines seems to have set sail a little bit, but his car is pushing a bit, while Sensiba is able to hold the tight inside line and just might find another opportunity to get around and head for the front where Brian Refner is hanging out.
Right behind them is Jay Sauter in that white and blue car number 1. The AFCO Wisconsin Aviation machine of Jerry Gunderman. After a great start when this team joined forces at the midpoint of the season, they've struggled since, finished 2nd at Salem. We continue to watch this 9th and 10th place battle, and suddenly Refner may get his wish as he's made the pass of Bob Seneker heading down the backstretch.
And he puts a lap on the number 91 car there of Tom Harrington, who started at the back of the field. Now, if Brian Refner can hang on and lead a lap, he will pick up 5 bonus points and tighten up that rookie battle to a mere 12-point spread. and 12 points out of some 2,700 points that have been scored this season is less than 0.5%, and it's amazing that both the championship battle and the rookie battle for the Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year prize have gone down so tight at the end of this season. Never in the history that I know of anyway, and you would be more of an authority on that, has the battle been so tight at the end of the season.
You can see Brian Refner putting a lap on Dave Anspaugh with that bright pink logo of LA Luxury Vans, and now Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy come with him. A very dejected man stands on pit road with our Ralph Shaheen. Ralph?
Rob, you can see they're about ready to put the hood back on. Mike, what happened?
Apparently one of the spark plug wires shorted out.
Mike Miller is all set to get back in the car, get the Funko Land belts back on, and get back into the race.
Mike Miller with everything to gain and nothing to lose out here today. Just couldn't buy himself any good luck, but I am happy to hear, and I suppose fans of the number 18 car, oh, Yale Conley's backed himself up towards the wall. Didn't look like he hit it. It looks like Mike Miller's going to get back in the race, although he's down some laps, and he's going to have his work cut out for him.
Yale Conley, the young doctor from Vienna, West Virginia. You really have to wonder. I think his fellow competitors and most of the folks that are crew chiefs say he's got a lot of talent, but the fact that he is an emergency room surgeon keeps him out of the garage and off of the racetrack, and you just can't compete at this level without that much needed experience and do it week in and week out on a competitive basis.
And Yale Conley getting himself gathered back up again, going into the race. He has on the deck lid of his car, "Happy Birthday Sienna," his 9-year-old daughter, celebrating this weekend. And Dad couldn't be there. He's got to go racing. It's just a man's got to do what a man's got to do. But he's wishing happy birthday to his daughter, and we do too. Here's a look at Yale Conley just kind of going around all by himself up there. Can't tell what happened, if anything, to him. Just got a little loose and backed her uphill.
And kept it well out of the racing groove. You can see how dark it is up on that racing surface. Some sealer was applied, and it makes a second or third groove. Kent Stauffer now has come on pit road in car number 90. And this driver who season after season in his Kinetic Engines Flex Technologies Thunderbird runs in the top 10 no matter who comes and goes in this series, is on pit road and the first among the lead lap automobiles to make a stop.
He shoots back out under the caution flag that is still waving from the stand here at the Pennsylvania 400. Brian Refner has led his lap. Glenn Allen Jr. runs second. We'll be back with more. Here we go, looking at the battle for fourth place, and right away I want to apologize to Glenn Allen Jr. fans. He's running seventh, and those two results panels just changed so quick. I was surprised. But the battle up front, here it is for the battle for third and fourth. The battle up front, we should say, for the championship. Gary St. Amant, Bob Seneker, and Brian Refner lead Butch Miller and Mike Eddy around the racetrack here in the Pennsylvania 400.
Now, when Mike Eddy won the championship 2 years ago over Johnny Benson, he did it by leading the most laps. He has not led a lap yet, and he's going backwards. Here's a good battle for sixth position as Mike Eddy now is sliding backwards. Both Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller have gotten past, and Scott Hansen now begins to move into contention. He started sixth. He and Glenn Allen started in the fourth row, and they're battling for a spot. Shortly, I think they may give some pressure to Mike Eddy. And Eddy does not go backwards like this unless he's got a car that's at less than full pace.
We should say that
and we've got a problem, Brian. Apparently, it looks like the car number 32, I believe, of Ted Smokestad, has lost a right front fender halfway down the backstretch. And there it is. It's, again, about halfway between turns 2 and 3 as he came together with, I think, Tom Harrington. Knowing our crack camera crew, they saw it. We didn't.
So we have some real live, honest-to-goodness debris on the racetrack, and a whole bunch of it, in fact. This fender off the number 32 car, as you said, it just might be. I started to mention that while we have gone on here about the championship battle between Mike Eddy and Butch Miller and the battle for the Pat Shower Memorial Rookie of the Year between Brian Refner and David Sensiba, we should mention, and I mean, I feel like the battle for who's going to win the Pennsylvania 400 may be independent of either of those two scenarios, because while these guys are watching each other, it could be that someone like a Scott Hansen or a Glenn Allen Jr. goes to the front, or a Gary St. Amant to win this race and get their moment in the sun amidst all the interest that we're providing in the championship battle and the rookie battle.
I see Tim Steele minus the fender. I don't think it was Smokestad. Here's how the drivers got here. This season, Butch has won 3 times, came early in the season. 3 pole starts, 14 top 10 starts, and an equal number of top 10 finishes. Of course, he has led every step of the way, having earned the first victory of the year, that coming at our inaugural race in Denver, Colorado. 2,708 points. And there's Mike Eddy. He's won 3 more races than has Butch, but he's dropped out of a couple of more events. He has an identical number of top 10 starts and an equal number of top 10 finishes. But the races that he did drop out of, he was out much earlier, thus the whopping 8 points difference in their current point standings. And again, if either driver leads a lap today, Brian, 5 bonus points if they should happen to lead the most laps, an additional 5. And by the looks of the way this young man, Brian Refner, is driving his Ford Thunderbird, I'm not sure anybody's going to lead the most laps other than that car.
Well, Brian Refner could really put a jewel on his crown if he's able to not only win this race, but use that finish to win the rookie championship. And we have talked time and time again as this battle began shaping up, maybe the 2nd or 3rd race into the season, it has been a dandy all year long.
And those sixth place best finishes twice is really not indicative of how fast he's been. He's had some mechanical problems. He has been close to winning several races this year, as is Dave Sensiba. He is 2nd in total laps completed. And look at Sensiba, 5th in total laps completed. Both of them well over 95%. The one thing that doesn't show that you and I noticed, there's $120 difference in total money earnings.
Chump change. Chump change. I mean, you could have covered these 2 guys with a postage stamp all summer long. It has been unbelievable how, and we have certainly tried to chronicle at least, how enjoyable the rookie battle has been all year long. When one has a good race, the other one does too. When one has a bad race, the other one seems to find a way either not to finish or to have a problem. And thus it has been all season long. They were actually offered, hypothetically, the opportunity to have co-rookies of the year, split 40,000 equally between the 2 of them, and stand on the podium together. No way. Racers say, we're going for it all. First place or no place.
You just wonder if every TV set in Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin, and every set in Grand Rapids, Michigan is tuned into this one. I know the folks at Tepper Nursery there in Grand Rapids are watching in force today, trying to cheer their Dave Sensiba on to a victory in the Pennsylvania 400 this afternoon.
There's Bob Seneker. There's Gary St. Amant, and 3 or 4 car lengths ahead of them, Brian Refner, who was extremely fast in qualifying. It took him a couple of sessions to really get that number 5 car dialed in, the Structural Transport Thunderbird. But once he did, he just set sail. And then he came out, and everybody was scratching their heads wondering how a rookie could be so fast. He went right out and took the pole position away from some of these great veteran drivers. Let's go down for a quick one with Ralph Shaheen. Ralph?
Well, you were talking about Mike Eddy, and yes, he is having a problem with the handling of his car. It's a little bit loose right now. They're just going to ride it out. Should also mention that Larry Zett in the 05 is having handling problems. He came in, took tires, and he's back out on the racetrack.
There's Mike Eddy about to get a move put on him by 53 Scott Hansen. Of course, if Hansen could win this race, it would be 2 in a row for the new car owner in the number 53 automobile. That's the Hansen Motorsports AFCO Thunderbird. Here's the battle for 2nd. Gary St. Amant. Whoa, he makes a big move, or else Bob Seneker has a big problem all of a sudden, just as we get a shot of those 2. But Seneker keeps chugging around on the inside. Meanwhile, Gary St. Amant takes Butch Miller around the outside. So Miller heading for the front, Mike Eddy heading for the back. Things are looking good for the points leader right now.
I know all 38 starters today wanted a victory this afternoon, but I think if you had a measuring scale to determine who wanted it the worst, that guy did. Gary St. Amant. He's had focus painted everything all season long, and now Glenn Allen moves alongside Mike Eddy. We've got Fords running in the top 5 positions, and now Glenn Allen tries to put his CarQuest Pontiac into 6th, relegating the Goodwrench machine of Mike Eddy to 7th position.
And the number 85 car, another new entry here.
That's
up
Tim
against
Steele. He's got the HS Diane engineering machine, and that's the 2nd situation that he's been involved in. Again, he's kind of out of our sight other than on this monitor, and we're not sure what might have happened to Tim, who was the one that lost that fender, obviously, a little bit earlier on the backstretch.
And that's the most recent of several incidents in that turn 3-4 area. Apparently a trouble spot here on the Jennerstown Speedway. So as the number 85 car and Tim Steele try to gather themselves back into action here, and with 40 laps gone, we'll take a break. Back to the Pennsylvania 400 at Jennerstown Speedway. Brian Drever along with Rob Albright and Ralph Shaheen down on pit road. The green flag is in the hands of Roger Slack, and waving at Brian Refner, the pole sitter, who has picked up his 5 points and now trying to find 5 more. If he can just keep leading laps, he'll get 5 more points for leading the most laps in the race. But chasing hard behind him, the very hungry Gary St. Amant and the points leader, Butch Miller.
We'll continue to see those 5 blue oval carrying Ford Thunderbirds running out in front. It's all for naught in terms of the championship, as Pontiac has already locked that up. In case you're wondering, why would Mike Mike Eddy, if he's got an ill-handling race car, continue to stay out there. I think he realizes that we will probably see a number of caution flags. He'll wait, not jeopardize going a lap down, maintain track position out there, not get himself in the tail end in a position where he can be involved in an incident, Brian.
Up to 1,000 cautions and 10 million laps.
Oh, get real.
It'll be April by then.
Till
Yes.
April.
Brian Reffner leads by a couple of car lengths over Gary St. Amant there in the Winsport City Ford Thunderbird. St. Amant trying to find a little bit of room around the outside. It gives Butch Miller some room down on the inside. So we've got a little bit of a double team going against Brian Reffner, the race leader right now, pole sitter, with Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller trying to gang up on him there. One trying to go high while the other one goes low. Bob Seneker with a front row seat watching those three cars ahead of him. And Scott Hansen chugging towards the front. Mike Eddy still trying to wheel it around down on the inside, but getting a heck of a challenge from Glenn Allen Jr.
Take a peek at the top running cars here in a minute. Brian Reffner, of course, has led since taking over the point from Bob Seneker, who led the first few laps, and Gary St. Amant is coming on strong, sitting right behind Reffner. Butch Miller is up to third, would like to lead and pick up 5 bonus points. There is 5th through 8th position. Scott Hansen, Mike Eddy hanging on to 6th, Glenn Allen Jr. and Steve Holtzhausen. Steady Eddie as usual in 8th position.
Looks like Glenn Allen Jr. has made the pass on Mike Eddy now, pushing the black 88 car back one more spot in the standings. And Glenn Allen Jr., of course, somewhat responsible for the success of the Pontiac brand throughout this season, but of course the man that has really carried the banner has been Mike Eddy in the GM Goodrich Pontiac there, and that is largely why Pontiac has sewn up that manufacturer's championship. Here's a race for the lead now. Brian Reffner trying to hold off Gary St. Amant down on the inside. St. Amant's got it hooked up high and gets around, dives right over the top. Reffner can do nothing but watch him go. And right there in the 3rd spot, Butch Miller, the beneficiary of all this dicing action, now he finds a way on the high side.
Now watch how quickly Miller will try to reel in St. Amant. Butch was able to use Gary's line to take 2nd position away from Brian Reffner. St. Amant has worked much harder than has Butch to get to the front, and I think he's probably got just a little fresher tires on the right side. If he can catch Gary, he may be able to dispatch with him and pick up his 5 leading bonus points.
Of course, Butch Miller would like nothing better than to color himself gone right now with Mike Eddy having handling problems. Butch Miller's car is working fine, thank you very much. And with Gary St. Amant leading the way, Butch Miller has found a sleigh ride to the front and hope to pull away. Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen right now. He's got a little bit more on the Butch Miller situation. Ralph?
Brian, if you ever wanted to watch Butch Miller in attack mode, now is it. I talked to crew chief Gary Showalter. They're going to the front. They want to lead a lap. They're going to do everything they can to get around Gary St. Amant and collect 5 more points.
If they're able to get around and collect those 5 points, that would put it back up to a whopping 13-point bulge. Oh, my word, Rob Albright. Then it would just be all but in the bag for Butch Miller, wouldn't it? 13
Nah,
points?
I don't think so.
Come on, who's kidding who here?
We got about 3 hours to go here this afternoon, or very nearly 3 hours to go. Still a long stretch of race in front of us. But Butch Miller now is using the strategy that we normally see from Mike Eddy. Run to the front, stay up in front, and Mike Eddy looks more like the traditional Butch Miller. Lay in wait, sit in the bushes, and wait for a chance to ambush. You know?
Well, you obviously didn't see my tongue planted firmly in my cheek, nor feel the tip of my finger poking you in the ribs when I said that. I mean, 13 points, you've got to be kidding me. We've seen points leads 56. Well, in fact, 2 years ago, of course, you would have a lot better information about this. The points difference was something like 38 points between Johnny Benson Jr. and Mike Eddy, and they came in, and of course, Mike Eddy able to hold off and win by a couple of points that season. Here's another pass and a move for the lead as Gary St. Amant goes over the outside now. Butch Miller in 2nd spot as we continue to watch these 2 guys all but swapping paint up front, and Butch Miller trying to pick up 5 points.
He did. In fact, what he said is, I'm going to lead a lap and then settle back in a 2nd position. That's exactly what happened. And we've again got problems in turn number 3.
Big problems in turn number 3. That's not a hot dog roast over there. That's a car on fire. Looks like Yale Conley's number 3 is the one with the hood off and in flames. Can't get a good ID on the other car. Oh, it's Bill Baird's number 26, the black car with the orange trim. And Conley coming out, physician, heal thyself. Get out of that number 3 flaming car. Here comes the track crew over to put out the fire. And it looks like turn 3-4 has collected not 2 but 4 victims. We see Ted Smokestad and the number 2 car of Kevin Sawinski up against the wall as well.
Smokestad, of course, was one we had talked about, the new sponsor, Super America, coming on board today. looking at going with this team all year next year in a gun for Rookie of the Year, or run for Rookie of the Year, I should say. And look how severe the damage appears to be on the front of the Saturn Machines Gulf State Chevrolet of dirt track veteran Bill Baird, who that's not the way you want to end your rookie season. I think Bill is okay. The window net is down. Dr. Conley is out. That's him. You can see him. He's going to be attended to by the paramedics, but I don't think they're going to need to do much. Is this one of these physician heal thyself kind of thing? Ralph, tell us about the doc.
Well, we got him right here. Yeah, you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. This car's spinning in front of us. The track's greasy, and there's just nowhere to go, Ralph. Had nowhere to go.
Well, he's out of the car, and he's okay. And if you stay with me for half a second, we'll get Bill Baird over here and make sure he's okay.
There's Russ Gaines.
There they are.
46.
Talking to him. Let's see if he's all right. Bill, you okay?
Yeah, fine. No problems.
What happened to you?
The car in front of me, I guess they all just slowed down for a second. Everybody got on the brakes, and I tapped the 46 car, and he turned sideways. That turned me sideways, and it's over with for today.
Let's take a look at our best view as we watch Dr. Yale Conley talking to the other medical staff there, telling them he's okay. There's everybody scattering out. Oh, a big center punch hit right there for Yale Conley, and then his car burst into flames. There's Gamester up on the outside. I think he was the one that they talked about. Here you can see the number 2 car and the 32 of Smokestad parked, and flames coming out of that one too.
And I think the problem for Yale Conley, probably an oil line was knocked off, and that black smoke an indication of that. You can see Kevin Sawinski on hands and knees, seeing if the damage could be repaired on car number 2.
While the track crew takes care of it and the crowd takes a look at the carnage in the turn 3-4 area, we'll cut away from the action once again. Still a lot more to come. Friday night, join Prime Championship Boxing for 12 rounds of WBC International Junior Middleweight Boxing. Entering the ring, one leaves as the victor, the other lives a nightmare. Prime Championship Boxing Friday night on most Prime affiliates. Right now, we're seeing a heavyweight title fight, and we've had a couple of knockout punches here, not for the contenders, but for some of the guys who are trying to race for the win here today, not championship contenders nevertheless. Let's go down once again to Ralph Shaheen, who is with Ted Smokestad, and that car right there.
Well, Ted, your car looks pretty torn up, but you're motioning to the crew like you think you might be able to get back in?
Well, we're going to have it pulled in, Ralph, and take a look at it. This Super America car's been running pretty good today. We just kind of biding our time. It's an awful long race, and a couple cars were beating and banging for a couple laps in front of us there and just got a little out of hand, and they wrecked, and the 2 car and myself kind of got caught up in it there. But we'll be back another day. Like I said, we're just trying to put on a good show for the people over at Super America this weekend, and we'll get it in, take a look at it, and see how things turn out.
Nice young man, and we'd love to see him come run for Rookie of the Year. We've heard tales about Cindy Peterson and Brett Bell and a whole bunch of others going for $50,000 in the rookie battle next year.
Well, those are stories for another time and another season. Right now, we're taking a look at the Pennsylvania 400, the final race of the 1994 season, with Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller leading. Welcome back, everybody, to the Pennsylvania 400. We have counted off 65 laps, many of them under caution. We have had several incidents, the most recent of which up in turn number 3-4 had 4 cars all over the racetrack. Once again, let's go down to Ralph Shaheen with more.
Well, Brian, you can see they're hooking up Yale Conley's car. We just wanted to show you where right underneath the carburetor is where the fire came out of. You can see back here, this hose connects to the carburetor, came apart. That's where the oil came out of. That's where the fire came from.
And it was a dandy while it lasted. Of course, the track crew getting over there pretty quickly to extinguish it. They are still clearing away the wreckage of the cars over there. Yale Conley's automobile, that of Smokestad, and the number 2 car still sitting up on the banking of Kevin Sawinski. A lot of young fans out there in the American Speed Association have enjoyed the work of our colleague Josh Duvall. Here's the latest entry.
This week's question comes from Ryan Whitaker of Hamptonville, North Carolina, and he wants to know, what is the advantage of running a fiberglass body over a sheet metal one? So we went to Dave Sensible, the leading rookie contender, for the answer.
Hi, Ryan. This is ASA's got a couple different reasons for running a fiberglass body over aluminum. One, the configuration, and you want to keep, they have a template, they call it template style. And 2, they're durable and easy to fix over aluminum. And thanks again for writing in.
Thanks, Dave. This is the last race of the season, so to all of you who wrote in this year, thank you, and we hope to hear from you again next year.
Of course, what Dave was talking about when he used the word template, there is a cutout that's shaped exactly like the factory Lumina, and that must fit uniformly over Dave's race car. There's also one for the Pontiac Grand Prix, another for the Ford Thunderbird. That is why these cars so closely resemble their factory counterparts.
Taking a look at the front while the cars continue to circle the field and the track crew continues to try to clean up the fluids dumped in the turn number 3-4 area. We will take yet another pause from the cause here at the Jennerstown Speedway to watch these important messages, and we'll watch the racetrack for you. Hello again, everybody, as we watch the cars continue to circle under caution here, and the final car about to be removed from the racetrack. That the number 2 car of Kevin Sawinski out of Wisconsin, the Gillen JB Car Care Product Chevrolet, an unfortunate victim of all the carnage up there in turn number 3 and 4. 3 incidents so far in that area, Rob Albright, and that looks like it's definitely going to be the trouble spot on this racetrack here today.
And an interesting story is Sawinski. We've seen him in this car on a couple of occasions, gave it a great run at Cedar Rapids earlier this year. We've also seen Bobby Archer in the car, and most recently Tony Raines, who finished second in that car a couple of weeks ago at Toledo. Unfortunately, Tony is not able to compete in it this weekend. His regular car owner, Ernie Roselli, is back for the race at Jennerstown. This is kind of in his own backyard. So Sawinski had to fill in for Raines. And there is Tony Raines. A little bit confusing. Tony's plans very much up in the air for 1995, as are his car owners, Ernie Roselli.
Well, they call it the silly season, don't they, at the end of the year and before the beginning of the next season, when everybody starts playing a little bit of musical chairs. That's not so much the case in the American Speed Association, but we are not without our off-season stories. Right now, we've got a break story. We're going down to Ralph Shaheen, who we saw running off with a handful of stuff. Ralph, what's going on?
Well, we're out here in the North 40 in the back paddock area where all the passenger cars are parked. We want to show you a little bit more about templates and what they are. These are the ASA templates. They're made out of wood, and you can see this is for a Cutlass. Now, what they do to show you how close they fit to a street car, this is a stock Lumina right off of somebody's showroom floor. The Lumina template fits right over the roof of this car, and it will match up perfectly just like this with the race car. Just in case you have to practice at home, this one belongs to some guy named Brad Loney, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if it belongs to him. I think that's definitely a Brad Loney fan. Brad, by the way, has moved from 26th at the start up to 14th position, and local regular Rick Miller has tailed him. He's running right behind Brad from 28th to 15th. And so as you can see where your favorite driver is currently, if you're a Gary St. Amant fan, hey, you got to be thrilled. He's up at the point with Butch Miller.
Row.
Having earned his 5 bonus points, he led 1 lap. Brian Refner has led the most laps thus far. Seneker has also set the pace for the first few laps of this race. All Ford Thunderbirds.
But the Pontiac fans can take some consolation in the fact that they have clinched the championship this year, thanks to Glenn Allen Jr., as we mentioned before, and to Mike Eddy in the number 88 car, who's currently 7th after starting 3rd, has slid towards the rear. There's Steve Holtzhausen with another good run, poised perhaps for victory number 3 this year. He certainly had a good run in a couple of races this year.
We were looking at Tony Raines a moment ago, started 10th, now runs 9th, has swapped a spot with Dave Sensiba, the leading rookie contender. Jay Sauter runs in 11th, and A.J. Cooper, having a stellar performance, started 11th, runs in 12th position.
If the race ended right now, Brian Refner's chance for the rookie championship is looking mighty good indeed, with Dave Sensiba buried back there in 10th place, while Refner's running much closer to the front. And a look at the rest of the field as they file by here. The track crew continuing to clean up things. There's Tom Jones, who won this race a year ago when it was rained out on Sunday and held on Monday. And Brad Loney, now I got a little bit more about this situation. That was a rental car. Brad has somebody on his young and fun-loving crew that stencils the Brad Loney 33 on every rental car they pick up in every town they visit. And on that note, we'll see you in another couple of seconds right here on Prime at Jennerstown Speedway. The green flag waves, 78 laps into 400 here at the Jennerstown Speedway in the Pennsylvania 400 final race of the 1994 season for the ASA and the AC-Delco Challenge Series. Gary St. Amant in the Winds Port City Ford Thunderbird shoots to the front. Butch Miller, the points leader, running in second spot, and Brian Refner, contender, trailing by 17, actually trailing now by only 12 points in the Rookie of the Year battle, runs 3rd.
And the season points leader getting a challenge from the rookie points runner-up, Brian Refner, but leader at the moment, where the race ends right now, as they begin to ease away somewhat from Bob Seneker. Was that really true about somebody on Loney's crew stenciling?
Absolutely. These guys, the average age on Brad's crew is 28. Now, you and I might remember, and for you it's a more recent memory, of when I was 28 or younger, and And of course they do. They have a little stencil, and when they come to town, they rent a car, and they take the white shoe polish, and they put Brad Loney number 33 on the back of the car.
And my mother is running for president in 1996.
Let's talk about Gary St. Amant. And out of 17 races this season, he has sat on the pole. He has been a contender, but he has yet to get a victory. Number 18, the lucky one, perhaps, for the driver of the 7 car.
And it's been a while coming. I think this could be the day for Gary St. Amant. Still at least 15, 20 cars with a shot. Here is Dave Sensiba. And I remember about 40 laps ago, we were in this exact same position. Tony Raines was taking a spot away from Sensiba, and now Dave has pulled back into 9th position. And there's a good battle for 4th position as well, as it looks like Glenn Allen Jr. has now wrestled that spot away from Bob Seneker. So finally, the manufacturer's champion, Pontiac, beginning to show a little bit of strength as Butch Miller has moved right in behind Gary St. Amant yet another time.
Now, Butch won't get another 5 points for leading another single lap, but he nevertheless is challenging for the lead there. Certainly has found a better way around the low side of the racetrack. Gary St. Amant pedaling around the high side of the bank here at Jennerstown Speedway. Butch Miller keeps showing him a little fender down underneath, not really trying to make a pass, just letting him know that he's down there and he can run low on the track.
Just out of frame, Mike Eddy's car seems to be working a little bit better. Now, he's one of those veterans like Butch Miller, as you see running in 2nd position. If the car's not handling particularly well, he'll adjust his driving style. Now, Dave Sensiba has picked up yet another position. Now he's gotten beneath car number 78, Steve Holtzhausen. So here are these 2 rookies at Jennerstown Speedway. Sensiba, who's working toward the front, and Refner, who's already been there.
Well, now Dave Sensiba marching backwards through actually pretty much holding his own. Brian Refner, who qualified on the pole, runs 3rd. And Sensiba, a very patient young man, maybe thinks that, listen, you know, I better not just be pedaling along back here and riding around, waiting for something to happen, waiting for Refner to come back to me. Maybe he's saying to himself, my car's working just fine. I better get up there because things are starting to spread out up front a little bit now. There's only 5 spots or 4 spots between the 2 of them, but there's a lot of real estate in between the lead car and 8th place where Sensiba is now. And
there is Brian Refner, the man that Sensiba is chasing. He runs in 3rd position in car number 5 behind Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller.
Sensiba's got a big gap to cross from 8th up to 7th place running Mike Eddy. Mike Eddy trying to deal with Scott Hansen in the 53 and not having a whole lot of luck doing that. And up front in the top 5 spots, Bob Seneker chasing Glenn Allen Jr. and the 3 leaders you're looking at right here. Gary St. Amant in the orange number 7 wins Port City Ford Thunderbird, and Butch Miller staying out of trouble and in contention all day long so far.
We continue to watch drivers use different lines down into turn number 1. Seems to be a single groove here in turn number 3 for the most part. That's where all of the incidents have taken place thus far today. Seems like it's just one groove wide, and if you slide just a little bit high, you're in trouble. Now watch them again in turn 1. St. Amant drifts a little bit. It looked like Butch Miller's entry to the turn was a little bit later and a little bit deeper. He moved higher right at the end of the racetrack. You really don't get a picture or perspective of how tight that corner is. The straightaways are pretty long for a half-mile racetrack. The turn's rather tight.
Glenn Allen Jr. making his way into the picture now. As you can just see, the white number 15 starting to show up in contention now. He drives the CarQuest Auto Parts Port City Pontiac. And there he is, just the nose of the white 15 car. And down on the inside, taking another lap out is number 16, John Freeman in the Tioga Pines entry. Freeman qualifying near the back of the field, getting out of the way while the leaders go around the outside.
Glenn Allen is definitely closing on the front-running triumvirate. Now he's right on the back bumper of Brian Refner in car number 5. He, like Gary St. Amant, really needs a win. Now, he got one earlier this season, but boy, did they have problems mechanically, particularly with engines earlier this year. And they are an uncertain entity for the 1995 racing season. Nothing finalized on sponsorship with CarQuest. Glenn Allen, we know, has been contacted by some Busch Grand National teams and other ASA teams, but car owner Leroy Troop, who's had a prominent presence in ASA since the mid-'80s, is hoping that sponsorship deal can be put together so he can retain the services of both Glenn Allen and crew chief Chris Bradley for next season.
If Glenn Allen Jr. has exercised his engine demons, Mike Miller has inherited them. He's back out on the racetrack, but for Mike Miller fans, the car number 18 down a whole bunch of laps. He lost 13 the first time he came in and a handful more, so he's got his work cut out for him to get himself back up there and try to pull off a top 10 finish after he had been as high as second in points during the early part of the season. Here's Brian Refner doing what he's got to do, staying up front now, trying to hold off Glenn Allen Jr. Dave Sensiba charging up towards him. And we said a moment ago, if the race ended then, Brian Refner would take the rookie battle. Not anymore, because Sensiba's made up a couple of spots.
And look at Gary St. Amant is pulling away from the third running car. Dave Sensiba's closed right in behind the 6th place car, number 88 of Mike Eddy.
Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen with more on Mike Eddy.
Well, it is going to be sometime around lap 100 when we see Mike Eddy and the rest of the top competitors making their way into pit lane. Right now, they're working around the mid-90s of the lap, so it's going to be a little bit before we see Mike Eddy or anybody else making a pit stop up front.
Now, we had a lot of cautions early, but we have to think that now that it's thinned out just a little bit here, it's unlikely, or at least not as likely, that we're going to get a caution for incidents on the racetrack. Things have spread out. Everybody's found their way around the track. The grooves are good. The track is clean. And I don't know, are these guys going to have to go in under green?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think we'll see another caution. In reality, I think in terms of fuel, that would be the big question. About 200 laps is as long as they could go about 100 miles. A minute ago, you saw Glenn Allen take third position away from Brian Refner. Refner slides back, and Sensiba keeps coming to the front. We've seen this so many times this season, Brian, where whichever one of these drivers seems to be the strongest early in the race, that seems to reverse itself as the race progresses, and the pattern is holding, at least in the early stages today.
And likewise, as Butch Miller tends to be going forward, Mike Eddy tends to be going backward through the field, so things are spreading out a bit in the championship battle of the two contenders for the overall title here in the American Speed Association.
And you know what? Neither one of these cars are running that badly, now occupying 7th and 8th positions, but they have stretched out a full straightaway over the 9th place car, number 25 of Tony Raines, who leads a whole host of cars down the backstretch. Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller are making a shambles of the field as they are really reeling in some of the cars that we expected to stay on the lead lap all day long. Look at Sensiba all by himself, and look how Mike Eddy drifted way high in turn number 1. Collects it and heads down the backstretch, but lost a lot of ground on the racetrack.
There's a battle for 4th, and Scott Hansen, another man on the move here. He is rocketing himself up there now to go into contention with Brian Refner. Bob Seneker slipped around the inside a moment ago, and it looks like Hansen trying to do the same. Refner not so willing to give it up, although he does seem to be willing to stay up on the high side and open that door low.
We could actually see him the last time through turns 1 and 2. Look at him use the outside line. It's a little freer rolling on the tires. He was able to use that to his advantage to retake that position from Bob Seneker, and now Scott Hansen is using the high groove. Maybe that's becoming the fast way around the racetrack.
Tires not likely to be so much of a factor, as you said, as fuel, because, well, they've turned a lot of laps and ticked off quite a few under caution. That doesn't hurt anybody's tires.
Tires are a factor, but they will uniformly slow down. In other words, they will affect most drivers almost equally. You'd see one guy come in under green. He would lose a lap at least in the process, but he'd be bullet fast back on the racetrack. Nobody wants to jeopardize a chance at a victory by coming on pit road. So as long as they're relatively equal in terms of the wear on their tires, you'll see them continue to stay out until fuel does become an issue.
Refner and Hansen now hooked up, trying to leave Bob Seneker in the dust as they race for 3rd and 4th place on the racetrack. The leader, Gary St. Amant, finding his way through traffic and taking Butch Miller along for the ride as well. We're looking at the race for 3rd, 4th, and 5th behind the two leaders, Gary St. Amant and Butch Miller.
Another factor comes into play here that we should mention, and that is that competition yellow. Should we run, Brian, 100 successive laps under green, which has always been unlikely at Jennerstown, we would have an automatic caution, and that would come just before lap 200. You can see Tom Jones is racing for position with A.J. Cooper, having his best run of this season on an oval, had a great run on a road course earlier this year. Tom Jones, a year ago, when we left on Sunday, couldn't come back and televise on Monday, he looked like a possible victor, but I guess he dominated when they came back under the sunnier skies on Monday. He's got a little damage to the right front corner of car number 0. He's lost several positions, but now the track seems to be coming back to Tom. At this point, at least, he's not in jeopardy of going a lap down, though he is about 2/3 of a lap behind the leaders.
Looked like he might have been trying to do a little more bodywork modification there, using the number 71 car of A.J. Cooper. Tom Jones, a couple of years ago, was the spoiler in the championship battle that came down to the final race of the season between Mike Eddy and Johnny Benson Jr. A little more on that, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. It was Tom Jones who finished 2nd 2 years ago, and those 5 points cost Johnny Benson the title. Benson had elected under caution to stay on the racetrack or come in for a pit stop when he could have stayed out and picked up a 5-point bonus that would have allowed him to win maybe back-to-back championships rather than just a single one in 1993. We've really had a chance change up front, and that is the fact that Glenn Allen Jr. now has got past Butch Miller for second position. He's very rapidly moving in on Gary St. Amant.
So we have the Pontiac number 15 of Glenn Allen Jr. chasing up Gary St. Amant and the Port City Winds Ford Thunderbird. Those two guys are running at the front. And we also have to talk about all this math game. And it would appear that these crews down on pit road, Rob, would, well, it would be a good thing if you could hire like Bill Nye, the science guy, to help figure out all the possible scenarios for points, position on the racetrack, leading laps, this and that. But yet the point spread is so small that it's really single-digit calculations, and even you and I could handle it, speaking for myself.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I've seen some mistakes made in terms of judgment as to when you come in, when you stay out, leading the laps, and so forth. So I'm sure that these teams have all discussed those permutations and possibilities over the previous 48 hours, and they're not going to make any mistakes today. I hope. They hope. I
was reading in the newspaper the other day, the Unlimited Hydroplane race season going down to its final race of the season. They were talking about what a close battle they had going. It was 400 and some odd points, but then they have like 9 billion points for the season that they give away, so they're in the same situation. Here's Dave Sensiba still moving on up through the field here, trying to get to the head of the class. He is at the head of the class for the season in the rookie battle, but he's trailing Brian Reffner by spots on the racetrack that could come back to haunt him.
Are you sure he is? Are you sure he's trailing Reffner by spots on the racetrack that could come back to haunt him?
As I glanced out the window, I tried to pull those words back, but they weren't tied to a string. I couldn't do it. Now they're side by side, door to door. This is the way we've seen them all season long, both figuratively and literally now. The two rookies who are battling for that $40,000 bonus prize at the end of the season, named in honor of Pat Schauer.
The drivers were admonished by Brian Robbins and Rex Robbins in the drivers meeting this morning. If you don't know who Dave Sensiba and Brian Reffner, Butch Miller, and Mike Eddy are, better go find them, meet them, memorize the paint scheme and numbers on their race cars. We don't want you to play a factor in the outcome of these battles. I'm not sure they meant each other necessarily to you.
Brian Reffner and Dave Sensiba, they were pitted 2 stalls apart during qualifying and practice. They were right next to one another and they're not real sociable with each other. They don't like hang out together, but they're very amicable and friendly to one another, and then they get in the race cars and just go after each other like a couple of cats and dogs. It's just been so much fun to watch. And in fact, for my money, in a lot of ways, watching these two young guys race has been more fun and exciting, really, than watching the old veterans going at it, Mike Eddy and Butch Miller, for the championship.
And here are a couple of guys that for years have been best of buddies ever since Glenn Allen Jr. came to ASA about 6 years ago as a ranked rookie. This guy that he's trailing, Gary St. Amant, was one of his mentors, along with the guy that's running right behind Glenn Allen Jr., Butch Miller. In fact, a few years ago, Gary and Glenn Allen Jr., both from Ohio, referred to themselves as Team Cuz. That's how they thought of each other, as cousins, if not, in fact, brothers.
And Glenn Allen Jr. trying to make a brief lead stick. He has got the low line. Gary St. Amant not willing to give up. Here's Glenn Allen Jr. around on the short inside line. And these two guys going side by side. One of them take the longer but slightly faster way around the outside. And it looks like Gary St. Amant, as they come up on some traffic, is going to be able to hold on.
Well, the interesting thing is, you wonder maybe why can Glenn Allen Jr. pull up alongside coming off the corner, then not able to make the pass down the straightaway. Different parts of the racetrack are faster than others in terms of where you want to be. When you're in the corners, most of the time you want to be down low. On the straightaways, you want to drift out toward the wall. Glenn can tuck under it coming off of turn 4 or turn 2, but he can't let the car ride freely up to the wall. That scrubs off RPMs, and he therefore loses speed. That's why he can get maybe a fender alongside, but can't complete the pass going into the turns.
Carl James at the number 8, Carbright Odessa Chevrolet, setting a pick there, but it looks like the other two managed to get around as Gary St. Amant went high. Glenn Allen thought about going low, and instead went up and caught the freight train behind Gary St. Amant. And as they clear the traffic and head out into the open part of the racetrack here at Jennerstown Speedway, we're going to take a look away. Hi there, Mr. Race Car fan. Having a good day. You certainly are. Lots more. Gary St. Amant and Glenn Allen Jr. might have been singing, damn, that traffic jam there for a while.
Hey, what's your language?
On their way out at some open track, and they are heading for the front. They are on the front right now, and everybody else is chasing them. It hasn't really tightened up too much behind them. They've put a lot of racetrack in between themselves and a handful of cars back to Butch Miller, who's running third.
This this has continued to be a fantastic but very cleanly waged battle around the racetrack. Glenn Allen has, I think, a little quicker car at this juncture of the race, but not enough faster to jeopardize the two. Now, he can drive it in deep going into that corner and get Gary out of shape, but he's simply not going to do it that way. And look who they suddenly are about to lap, Jay Sauter, who was in the top 10 earlier, and he now has to hope for a caution, and he certainly doesn't want to be the one to cause it.
Well, they've been using the other cars on the racetrack like slalom gates out here for the last 20 laps or so. Gary St. Amant on the outside. Glenn Allen Jr. tries him on the inside. Every time he does, there's somebody else down there. Down in the pits, however, Ralph Shaheen is with Bud St. Amant, who might have a little bit more word on what's Gary doing.
Well, that would be because Bud is Gary's dad and also his crew chief. Bud, what has Gary got to do to stay out in front of little Glenn? Where's his advantage?
Right now, he says the car is a little bit on the tight side, but probably the first caution will come in and put on some right side tires and get a little more stagger in him. And said the car feels pretty good, but it's a little bit on the tight side.
So what does he need to do on the racetrack then to stay in front of little Glenn? Where does he need to be?
He needs to be running a high groove. It's kind of hard to pass on the bottom here.
We should also point out that Tracy Schuler and Russ Gamester have called it a day.
Tight meaning, of course, he has trouble keeping the car at the bottom of the racetrack. Glenn Allen has no such problem with car number 15, but every time he gets a good run on Gary, it seems like somebody is in the way. This time, it's another Ohio driver, Joe Knott, who is just 22 years of age and has been one of the most improved drivers over the last couple of seasons, but he'll think better of it this time. He'll get out of the way and let his buddies go by. I think, although he didn't make it real easy for Glenn Allen, and look at Gary St. Amant sawing on that wheel, Brian, as he goes through turn 2.
Well, he does have a car that's just a little too tight front end, trying to make a right turn as he's doing everything he can to get it to turn left. But he has managed to stay out in front of Glenn Allen Jr. And as we watch the two leaders on the racetrack, things have really scattered out in the field out there right now, so that these two, while they're leading the race, we have to look back a long way to find out what things are going on with regard to the championship battle and the rookie battle.
If we do have green flag racing to lap number 175, as again Glenn Allen Jr. is alongside, and this time he may have enough of an edge. No, look at him wrestling with that race car as they move up on Dave Anspaugh's car number 37, and yet again, Gary St. Amant is able to use lap traffic to his advantage.
David Anspaugh down there with the LA West Luxury Vans new paint job on his car. And here's Mike Eddy in the black 88 about to fall out of the top 10. And young Brad Loney in the red 33 there, the Winnebago Flex Steel machine, he's been moving steadily forward. He had a terrible starting spot, and to be racing up there towards the top 10 is a great job for this young driver who has done nothing but move from sort of an also-ran to one of the very real contenders in this series in the space of one short year.
We've been watching that Winnebago Flex Steel Chevrolet make its way from 27th at the start of this race after a tough day Saturday to the top 10. And again, Gary St. Amant in lap traffic. Now, he and his dad talking about a car that's pushing, not handling very well, but there is Steve Holtzhausen, who early in this race was in the top 6, and now he is a lap down. I started to mention competition yellow. We're at lap 139. If we may remain green to lap 175, we will see an automatic caution flag.
Actually 177, not to nitpick, but that's where we're at right now. 140, we got about 27 more laps, then we will see a caution. Mike Eddy needs it badly, as do a few of the other drivers. Gary St. Amant, we just heard Bud talk about getting in there, putting a little bit more stagger in the car, make it turn left, and there's the lead. Gary St. Amant continues to use the lap cars extremely well. Bud's comment about difficult to pass down low has a lot to do with the fact that it's a little crowded down there.
Behind them in third position is now Scott Hansen, who's taken that spot away, and again Glenn Allen looks to the low side. It is now Scott Hansen third, Butch Miller fourth. Fifth position belongs to Brian Repner, who's gotten back by Sensiva, who is sixth. Bob Seneca is seventh. Eighth spot is Todd Forbes, who was in a hospital 2 weeks ago after a crash in Toledo. Ninth is Tony Raines, and that battle for 10th continues between Brad Loney and Mike Eddy.
There's Brad Loney down low. Mike Eddy up high has had handling problems since the beginning of this race, has not come in to correct any of them. No one has taken the chance at coming into the pit unless they absolutely had to, because position on the racetrack is so important, especially in light of the close battle for points for the championship, points for the rookies, and of course the victory here today at Jennerstown. 3 different and really independent stories to tell.
These drivers not in jeopardy, if you were wondering. At this point of going a lap down, they're a full straightaway ahead of the lead running duo of Glenn Allen Jr. and Gary St. Amant, who has set the pace for the greatest number of laps thus far today. And again, Loney looks to the low side. It's almost a carbon copy picture. As you can see, the Loney car and the Glenn Allen Jr. car both are able to work better on the low side. They can get alongside their challengers, but cannot make the pass. This time, maybe, I don't know. Glenn Allen is deeper than we've seen him so far today. Holds his breath, and he's got that spot.
Well, he's going to have to move up the track now because another lap car just ahead of him. He does take it away this time, and it looks like he may be able to make it stay there for good. He had to do it quickly, though, because as they come up on traffic, it is Glenn Allen Jr. who tries to run low. Gary St. Amant is able to run up high. Now Gary's got to try to follow Glenn, and he moves down low there briefly. Looked like he was going to try it low. I don't think that's going to be a very good idea considering the way things were going. It's Jeff Neal in the number 75 split-fire car that's the latest to go a lap down on the 2 leaders.
And look at St. Amant coming off turn number 4. He did try the low side. And we continue to see Brad Loney and Mike Eddy. Now, we joined this battle about 15 or 20 laps after Glenn Allen and Gary St. Amant. So maybe what Loney needs is another 10 or 15 laps to pull off that pass for 10th position.
30 more to a caution under competition yellow rule. That's what these guys are looking for, and it doesn't take long for the laps to tick down. About 20 seconds per. Maybe actually just under 19 is the lap record here for qualifications. And yesterday, only a couple of cars went under 19 seconds for qualifying. Of course, Brian Reffner, the fastest car, sat on the pole. He has sort of drifted back in the field a little bit, running further back and very close to the other contender. Actually, Dave Sensiba now has fallen off the pace a bit, and Reffner has put some ground in between him and the white number 4.
Brian,
now to Ralph in the pits once again.
We're down here with Chris Bradley, the crew chief for Little Glenn. Where does Glenn have to be on the racetrack to stay in front of Gary to make his car work the best?
Looks like if we stay on the bottom, we're a little better than Gary. We swapped grooves with him, and then Gary got underneath Glenn, so we're probably better off a little bit towards the bottom.
Well, how long will you go now till you come in to change tires and fuel up?
We'll probably stop on the next caution.
They probably will, I'd say.
We can start laying some money down here and probably find a hard time getting anyone to bet against us. And things have settled down just a little bit in the Brad Loney versus Mike Eddy battle, as Brad Loney seems to have clearly gotten the advantage, as has Glenn Allen Jr. over Gary St. Amant for the lead in the Pennsylvania 400. Here in Jennerstown, they're whooping it up, or at least dressed to do so, and we'll be right back. Everybody from Jennerstown, Pennsylvania, in the Western Hills of the Keystone State. The Pennsylvania 400, final race of the season in 1994 for the American Speed Association in the AC-Delco Challenge Series. We will crown not only our champion, but our Rookie of the Year, and hand out a lot of contingency money here today at the end of 400 laps of racing. Brian Drever, along with Rob Albright and Ralph Shaheen. Wish you could be here in person, but we're glad you're joining us on the air here on Prime.
Brian, we've got a new contender for the front position. Glenn Allen Jr. has pulled about 7 car lengths over Gary St. Amant, but St. Amant now has to worry about Scott Hansen, who's been an amazing story over the second half of the season. After parting company with car owner Jerry Gunnerman and going from Chevrolet to Ford, buying a team that had gone belly up and immediately being competitive, and then winning 2 weeks ago in dominant fashion at Toledo, a non-televised race, and now making his way to the front here today as he's up to 3rd position in car number 53. I think we've only got a dozen cars on the lead lap. It's Glenn Allen, Gary St. Amant, car number 53, Scott Hansen is 3rd. 4th, a long way back, is Butch Miller. Brian Reffner has now come back to 5th. In 6th position is, I believe, car number 07, Todd Forbes, and Dave Sensiba has dropped to 7th. 8th is a side-by-side battle between Tony Raines and Bob Seneker, and Brad Loney is closing on them in 10th. Mike Eddy is 11th in car number 88, and in 12th position, the last car on the lead lap is car number 71, A.J. Cooper.
It really doesn't surprise me that the 3 cars contending for the lead and perhaps the victory in this race are not the same cars that are going for that championship battle. A much different strategy being played out on the racetrack among those who have so much to gain with regard to the championship and the rookie battle than those who have nothing to lose and only the opportunity to pull the car down on victory lane at the end of this race.
I don't know that it's necessarily a strategic thing on maybe the part of Mike Eddy particularly. This is just vintage Butch Miller here this afternoon. But Mike likes to run to the front and be in control every step of the way if he can. But he is showing unusual restraint as he's been dealt a less than perfect hand. And now he's trying to bluff his way to stay onto the lead lap. And so far, he's done a masterful job of doing it. He's quite a poker player.
Mechanical problems have bitten each of these drivers, but more towards the end of the season for Butch Miller. And Mike Eddy seemed to have gotten most of his mechanical troubles out of the way early in the year. Toledo comes to mind when he was not able to finish. And it didn't look like Mike Eddy was even going to be a contender for the championship until late in the year when he has put together a great string, not only of victories, but of performances when he didn't win, to just slowly nibble away. I don't recall exactly where he finished in Denver and what position he was in the points battle, but it was way back. And he has just slowly, inch by inch, step by step, worked his way up to within 8 points of champion to be, perhaps, Butch Miller.
Brian, watch how high a line Scott Hansen is now running. Not quite so much here in turns 3 and 4 as he drops down about half a group, but watch him as he goes through turns 1 and 2. He was able to catch Gary St. Amant. Now watch, up, right to the top of that dark patch on the racetrack. That's where the sealer was put down, and that gives the tires extra adhesion on that right side. He's treacherously close to getting over the edge, if you will, what would be over the cushion on a dirt track, and slamming that outside retaining wall. So I think Scott now said, okay, I can run with these guys. I'm going to take it a little bit easier and make it these next 10 laps. That's how far we are away from a competition yellow.
There actually is a lot of granular debris up just above that dark part on the racetrack. We did see a few cars get up in there and engage a high pucker factor because it's slippery up there. In the marbles, they call it, as you say, or over the top, out of the racing groove. It's not the place to be in the turns to go much higher than where that black stripe is laid down.
And the complexion of this race will change totally because the change of tires, drivers are only permitted on this track to change 2 tires at any caution. You know they're all going to do it on the right side coming up in, I believe, just about 10 laps from right now. 10
laps to caution, unless it comes a little bit sooner. Butch Miller and Brian Refner, they have been pretty close to one another here for the last handful of laps. And the race for second place, Gary St. Amant, and now Scott Hansen sees the opportunity perhaps to take a position away before the anticipated caution. We'll see here in about 8 or 9 laps now.
You can see Gary St. Amant's the right side of that Wynn's Thunderbird rolling over as he goes into the turn. I watched it, look at his hands fighting, sawing on that wheel. Scott Hansen has a little better handling race car, but again, that's going to change in just a few laps when they come on pit road.
Glenn Allen Jr. just put Mike Eddy a lap down, so Eddy now not on the lead lap.
That is a major factor with just a handful of laps to go. I wasn't watching that. Mike was way ahead of Glenn Allen Jr. Not only has Glenn put Mike Eddy a lap down, but he's put A.J. Cooper a lap down, and suddenly there are only 10 cars on the lead lap.
Well, if I may be so brash as to say, that's why there's 2 of us up here. You were making a point, and I was watching what was going on the racetrack, and we've already mentioned that we can't see a lot of the racetrack in person from where we sit, but I do have a slightly better view.
And Butch Miller is slowing down. Butch is slowing in turn number 1. I don't know if he's got a problem or simply is allowing car number 5, Brian Refner, to make the pass. Now he's back up to speed, but he slowed rather dramatically going into turn number 1. Maybe he felt a tire going down. Maybe he's in radio communication with his crew, and maybe they just told him that his pursuer, Mike Eddy, is a lap behind him.
I'll take the low road, so maybe he spilled a cup of coffee in his lap and was slapping around in there for a second or 2. Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen with Gary Showalter, who's the crew chief for our race leader.
Well, that's a nervous moment for you. What happened? Why did he slow down?
Well, all we're trying to do is save the car. The car's pretty good. We're just saving it to the end.
Well, now with Mike Eddy going a lap down, how do you change your strategy?
We don't. We just race him like he's still on the lead lap.
And you know what? That isn't just lip service, Brian. That's exactly what they'll do. Butch will run his race. He's not going to pay a bit of attention. He won't take any unnecessary chances. But you can't be overly cautious. If you attempt to do that, you get yourself in trouble. It's hard to maintain concentration if you try to slow down on the racetrack.
Well, Butch Miller getting the job done when it has to be done. We're coming up in about 3 laps to a competition yellow.
And Bob Seneker about to go a lap down. Look at Glenn Allen Jr. going high, and Seneker says you're going to go even higher. Now watch Bob. Let's see if he can keep him in arrears. There's several other lead lap cars directly in front of this pair. And Seneker now tries to pinch him low, and Bob's going to try to do to Glenn what Gary St. Amant did earlier, and that is use lap traffic.
Well, Glenn Allen Jr. taking the low side that's worked well for him. Of course, stuck down there in front of him now are Tony Raines in the 25 car and Mr. Inside, Mike Miller there in the 18, who's gathered his car back up, although he's not a factor in the race. He's down a whole bunch of laps. The caution flag just about to come out. Everybody running hard to get to the line here, to get their positions on the racetrack, and we will see a lot of activity. Ricochet Ralph will be bouncing around big time down there in pit road in just a few minutes.
And Bob Seneker in that Johnsonville Sausage Ford Thunderbird did go a lap down as the caution flag has been waved. The competition caution by Roger Slack, so close for the driver who this year won the AC-Delco Systems Top Qualifier Award with 6 pole positions, about $15,000 in bonus money. But he wanted to win today, and he's going to have to work doubly hard if he's going to achieve that, having gone a lap down. Now, that does not take you out of this thing if you're Mike Eddy or Bob Seneker. It just makes the task much more difficult. We're still less than halfway.
Well, now for the first time today, we get to see the pit crews go to work. And if you think that a competition yellow makes it less important to get a good pit stop, well, you will have to pay attention very closely to what will be going on during these pit stops and what will be the result of that coming out after this competition yellow at 177 laps into the race. The pit crews are going to have to go to work. Position is all important, and just a few seconds on pit road can make all the difference in the world when the track is only a little over a half-mile around.
And all the lead lap cars will be permitted on pit road. They will all be on pit road. Mike Eddy, as the defending champion, has the best stall, and look where Glenn Allen is elected to select as a pit spot.
A few cars do remain out there on the racetrack, but most and virtually all of the leaders go back inside. Let's first go down to Ralph Shaheen, who is with Gary St. Amont's crew.
Well, Mike Snitko, the jackman, tries to get Gary's wind machine up in the air as Bud St. Amant and Gary's sister help with the fueling. The car comes down on the jacks. Gary's going back out already, and it looks like they have beaten out Little Glenn. They sure have. And now you're taking a look at Butch Miller's machine, and they're working on the rear end of the car. Looks like they chose to change 2 rear tires, which is what we heard Bob Seneker was going to do. So an amazing move by the Winch crew. They get Gary St. Amant in and out before Little Glenn.
In fact, several cars got out before Little Glenn did, including Scott Hansen, who will now run in second, and a great stop for the Structural Transport Ford Thunderbird of Brian Refner, who will now rejoin this race in 3rd position.
We'll come back, sort it all out for you following the pit stops here in just a couple of minutes. Some young Butch Miller fans just may have their way. Here's the way things shake out after the pit stops, although we are still under caution right now. Roger Slack is threatening with that green flag. Gary St. Amant leads. Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen.
Well, Brian, here's why everybody beat Little Glenn out of the pits. See the air hose and the gun broke apart right there. And that's what caused the problem for Glenn Allen and his crew. They had to go for a second gun, get it fixed, get him back out on the racetrack.
Not too bad a stop, though. He's still in 5th position. 9 cars remain on the lead lap. You saw the top 5, 4 others as we're back to green flag racing.
184 laps into this 400-lap event, and as much action as we have had, we're still not even to the halfway point. And for fans of most professional sports, you know that a lot of times the first 3 quarters just set up the 4th. So has this all been set up for what's to happen at the end of the race? You have to believe that that's the case. And now that everybody's got fresh tires and a full tank of fuel, things could be much different than we have seen for the first 184 laps of this one.
You're also going to see Mike Eddy, I think, on a mission. He's 4th in line among these leaders, though he is a lap down. He must make his way around Brian Refner, the pole sitter, Scott Hansen, and Gary St. Amant if he's to get back on the lead lap. So far, he's not been able to make the pass of Refner. He needs to make his move quickly and then hope for another lengthy run under green, or rather a quick caution, so that he can get back on the lead lap. And Glenn Allen Jr. is pressuring him. So it doesn't look like it's getting a whole lot better for Mike Eddy.
Well, Glenn Allen Jr. seems to have the car of the day out there. He's pretty much able to do whatever he wants, and he had the benefit of going in and getting a stop. Although he lost a few positions on the racetrack, perhaps his crew has an even better setup on that number 15 Pontiac. Northwest machine, Glenn Allen Jr.
Glenn, of course, is in 4th position. Directly behind him, as he goes to the low side of Mike Eddy, is 07 Todd Forbes in 5th. And behind Forbes is Brad Loney. He's up to 6th in car number 33. And look at Glenn Allen very easily getting around Mike Eddy. In car number 88, they have got to be perplexed. They've got to just be furious right now that they've not been able to solve the handling problem that has plagued them from the drop of the green.
And now, just like that, the Polar Bears got 4 cars to pass instead of 3. The job got worse instead of better as he came out with fresh tires. Todd Forbes in the 07 cars, you said before, 2 weeks out of the hospital, moving on up. started 23rd, and he still runs on the lead lap, just a couple spots behind Mike Eddy, who's down 1.
But he just lost 5th position to Brad Loney, who appears to be on a charge. And look at Loney now. Remember, before we went to caution, Loney had battled Mike Eddy for 10th position. Loney was close to going a lap down, and now obviously that Winnebago Flex Steel Chevy is working extremely well as he moves into 5th position.
The young Cedar Rapids driver's got a couple of wheels on a rail down on the inside, and all Mike Eddy can do is tuck in behind and hope to go for a ride behind the red 33. As Brad Loney heads for the front, Brian Reffner is still there. Dave Sensiba somewhat further back, and the rookie battle continues to be of a great deal of interest out here among those two, because there are but 12 points difference between them and several positions on the racetrack. The last time I said that, they ended up being side by side. They're no longer side by side, talking about Reffner and Sensiba. Here is Todd Forbes moving forward. Mike Eddy continue to move backward, and Jay Sauter seems to have the #1 car gathered back up again.
Sauter, like Mike Eddy, battling for position 1 lap down. That is a race for 10th position. Sauter now moves into 10th. And though Todd Forbes got by both of them, you got to wonder if he's experiencing some kind of problem, Brian. He's been showing a lot of smoke. Watch him in turn number 1. Now you can see a little wisp of it as Jay Sauter now tries to go to work on Forbes. Remember, Sauter is now in 10th position, 1 lap down. Behind Forbes 5th, it is Butch Miller 6th, Dave Sensiba is 7th, Tony Raines is 8th, Tom Jones showing in 9th position on the lead lap. I'm not sure that's right. I think Jones got lapped a little bit earlier, so I think Tom Jones is a lap down.
Mike Eddy watching a door-to-door fight between Jay Sauter in the #1 and Todd Forbes in the 07. The Noah Yoder machine going around the outside, trying to hold off Sauter, really working hard down low. Up front, it's Gary St. Amand, who got the great pit stop, shot out of there to take the lead on the race right now, and he continues to hold on to the front position, looking for his first victory of the 1994 season. Pushing him hard, though, Scott Hansen, looking for his 2nd in a row in the machine that he owns. We continue to watch this battle here. It's probably the best race on the track right now. Side by side, Forbes and now Sauter gets the inside and works ahead.
The battle for the lead between Gary St. Amand and Scott Hansen is in the offing as Hansen now runs right behind Gary's black and orange car number 7.
Scott Hansen trying to set up the number 7 Wynn Sports City Ford Thunderbird for a pass to take the lead for the first time in this race. We'll watch them for a couple of minutes while you watch some very important messages, and we'll be right back to Jennerstown Speedway for the Pennsylvania 400. Back to the Pennsylvania 400, and just a moment ago, a half lap ago, while you were away, the winner of the Wynn's Halfway Challenge. And how cool is this? It's the Wynn Sports City Ford Thunderbird of Gary St. Amand. He wins $500 from Wynn's for leading at the halfway point of the race today. But that wasn't what he was out to do. He has found himself at the front, and now he has been able to put just a little bit of distance in between himself and Scott Hansen, Little Glenn, Allen Jr., who are chasing him now.
But it is car number 33, Brad Loney, and the 5 machine of Brian Reffner, who have nestled in right behind Glenn Allen and Scott Hansen. Just before we came back to the live telecast, it was the 3 of them, Gary St. Amand, Scott Hansen, and Glenn Allen, literally right together, 3 wide out of turn number 4.
Here's the way things stacked up halfway through as we look down into the field behind Gary St. Amand. He was the leader 200 laps into this 400-lap race. We have had 6 lead changes among 4 drivers. The first one came on lap number 1 when Bob Seneker took the lead away from pole sitter Brian Reffner. And 6 cautions, well short of the 1,000 that I had secretly hoped for. And only 43 laps, so I don't think we're going to make it all the way to April here in the Pennsylvania 400.
Yes, we did have that one extended caution with Dr. Conley, Dr. Yale Conley, and Bill Baird involved in very heavy contact and a momentary fire, but no injuries. Well, probably the most dejected guy on campus here this afternoon at the moment is Howdy Thomas, crew chief for Mike Eddy. Ralph, take it away.
Howard, what's wrong with the car? The new tires didn't seem to help it any.
No, I don't know. The car's still real loose. Apparently we're a little off on the stagger. We cut the stagger down and it didn't seem to help any, so I guess we got to go further.
So which way do you go now? How do you do? What do you got to do?
Well, next step, we'll change left sides and we'll put bigger left sides on and cut the stagger down some more.
But you know what, Brian? This is a 400-lap race, and I mean as late as lap number 397 or 398. If Butch Miller had trouble, Mike Eddy could still clinch the championship. So you absolutely cannot go away here this afternoon, even though the handle has gone away for Mike Eddy.
Of course, we look back on the history for Butch Miller. A couple of times we've been ready to crown him the winner of a race, and he's gone kaflooey at the end. And a couple of times we were ready to write him off. Brainerd comes to mind, and he ends up coming back to win the doggone thing. So Butch Miller somewhat of an enigma. When we try to get him out of a race, he stays in to foil us, and when we try to put him on the victory stand early, he goes out. So a lot of things could happen to Butch Miller, while Mike Eddy is having very steady and predictable problems right now that has Howard Thomas and the rest of the crew scratching their heads.
And we've got Tom Harrington against the wall over in turn number 2, and he will bring out a caution.
That's the one that Mike Eddy and Howard Thomas needed, perhaps. Let's see if they come in. That'd be a big chance to take to come in this quick, as Tom Harrington, with a lot of damage on the front end of his car. He was using that car as almost like a bulldozer yesterday in the last chance qualifier. Tom Harrington in the BFI entry.
By the way, no matter what you think of Butch Miller, I don't think it's a good idea to resort to name calling.
What did I call him? An enigma?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do have to apologize for that. On the horns of a dilemma. But Butch really has been so steady throughout the season.
Unpredictable.
Yeah, steady in his own way. And it looks like we're going to have pit stops en masse coming in as everybody is tucked down on the low side below the pace car that circles the track right now. And
you know what? Mike Eddy has dropped to the bottom, but this is the time that he might want to stay out, because if he stays out, he could move back to the tail end of the lead lap.
That's the dilemma upon the horns of which we are.
Oh, you're a trip. And Ralph is in Butch Miller's pit. Ralph?
Well, we're in Gary St. Amont's pit, actually, as we're watching Gary St. Amont's crew change the left side tires now. Scott Hansen's crew just in front of them doing the same thing, and right behind them is Butch Miller. Butch Miller's crew is getting ready to change that as Gary St. Amont gets beat out this time by Little Glenn. So Glenn Allen Jr.'s crew this time with a better working air gun gets in and out of the pits better.
The slow stop this round was for Scott Hansen, who had an excellent pit stop the last time. And Brian Repner had elected to stay out. He inherits the lead in car number 5.
Took a glance down there, and Jay Sauter had some trouble getting around the Odessa number 8 car on pit road. Lots of things going on, lots of stories still to tell, and we'll be right back to do just that here at Pennsylvania for the twin checkers here at the Pennsylvania 400. But we do want to tell you that motorhome facilities for Group 5 sports and the AC-Delco Challenge Series are provided by Winnebago Industries. For more information about Winnebago, call the number on your screen, 1-800-643-4892, Winnebago.
And, of course, the driver of the Winnebago H&W Flex Steel Chevrolet is Brad Loney. And Brad has a lot at stake. He is right now the only Chevrolet driver on the lead lap. If a Chevy wins today, Brian, a $28,000 bonus. What a way to celebrate a career first victory it would be for the young man from Iowa.
You know, and it's a good thing he can't hear us. You know, we've enjoyed Brad. He's such a lively, animated guy. But his crew, they always worry about it because he's so worrisome about things. And we talked about that before. He's got 27 bolts holding his seat down. We'll get back to a little bit more on that. Right now, we're going quick down to Ralph Shaheen that's got something burning.
Well, as far as tires go, Brian, Butch Miller's done some unique things. First pit stop, he changed the 2 rear tires to work on a stagger. Now he changed the right sides. The left front tire's been on the car since the start, and it will go at least 300 laps at Jennerstown as the green flag comes out.
Green flag, 217 laps down, 183 to go as Mr. Math is on duty here today. Better be on duty down there in the pits of Butch Miller, of Mike Eddy, of Brian Repner, of Dave Sensiba, because lots of things can happen. Positions on the racetrack translated to points at the end of this race, as do laps led. That doesn't seem to be as much of a factor because aside from a brief jaunt in the lead for Brian Repner and for Butch Miller, they have done their cause as well and tucked back in to wait for the end.
Well, the drivers that started on the front row in exactly this same juxtaposition are there again, but for Bob Seneker, it's a much more meaningful opportunity as he's moved back into the lead lap. Remember, he'd gone a lap down just at the halfway point of this race, or at the competition yellow, I should say. And here come Todd Forbes and Glenn Allen Jr. now running in second and third positions.
Brian Repner, the rookie who sat on the pole, is the leader of the race right now. Bob Seneker just unlapped himself, and now Forbes goes alongside Glenn Allen Jr., and they're trading a little paint there. Glenn Allen still holding that low side line and hanging on to second place behind Brian Repner.
Well, Forbes elected to stay out. Glenn Allen and about 3/4, make that 7/8 of the field came on pit road, and he's already back into second position after that brilliant pit stop that we alluded to. Chris Bradley and crew vindicating themselves after the failed air wrench cost them several spots earlier.
Let's talk again about that $28,000 Chevrolet contingency and how Brad Loney is the leading contender for that because he's the closest to the front. We had talked before that Brad seems to fret over every little thing. So knowing that, a couple of days ago, I walked up to him and I said, by the way, Brad, we just want to remind you that there's $28,000 in contingency if a Chevrolet wins the race. And he, I know, gosh, I know, it's got me so worried. And I said, and besides that, we have also just got a late news flash that the fate of civilization as we know it also rests on the outcome as it depends on you. And he almost cried on the spot.
Yeah, you used the same line on Refner and Sensiva and anybody else that you could use it on. I don't know where you picked that up.
Just trying to add a little more fuel to the fire out there, but I didn't need to add anything. These guys have got butterflies the size of elephants out there this morning. And handling it very well, I should say, is Butch Miller right now. He has been very workmanlike in this race, and he's got a car that's working well. That doesn't hurt either.
Butch Miller is taking 4th position away from Todd Forbes. Mike Eddy is right there as well in car number 88, but we remind you he's a lap down. Now, we just saw the black flag displayed to, we believe, Tony Raines, who's been running in 8th position, or 7th spot, I should say. Only 8 cars still on the lead lap. We'll keep an eye on that and see if he's on pit road. Ralph, is there anything you know that we don't yet?
Yeah, he had fluid coming out of the backside of the race car, Rob. It looked like it was coming out of the overflow. So as soon as they maybe get him in just to check it, it has stopped now in the last couple of laps, so it should be a quick stop for Tony Raines.
Huh. Well, if it's stopped, does he need to stop? I guess that would be the real question. We'll continue to watch. We don't see the black coming out again, so maybe they've decided to hold that black flag for a while.
Things are starting to shape up here as we wind our way into the 3rd quarter of this championship event here for the American Speed Association. The fans are on the edge of their seat, some of them on their feet, and we'll be right back. When we take a break for commercial, sometimes we never know what's going to happen. What has happened is a news flash of the highest order. Mike Eddy out of the car, out of the race. He's with Ralph Shaheen. That's not good.
Mike, what happened to the car?
Something broke. I don't know for sure what it was. Something in the motor broke.
It just didn't seem like it was handling for you all day either. Couldn't get the setup right?
Well, we're a little off at the stagger there at the start, and that hurt us a little.
Well, that 8th championship will have to wait till 1995.
You know, you really hate to see it end this way. I don't care if you're a Mike Eddy fan or a Butch Miller fan. You want to see him race to the championship on the track. You could hear the dejection just a little bit. Mike rarely tips his hand with emotion. I could hear his voice crackling, and I know it wasn't because he was tired. It's because he's hurting big time.
Well, he was trying to cover the disappointment that he must be feeling, and few of us could understand what it means to a man who could have had and had within his reach an unprecedented 8 championship. And we really should reflect on just what that means. No one in a major motorsports series that we know of has won more than 7 championships, and Richard Petty comes to mind as one of those. So 8 championships would have put, and we emphasize the would have, Mike Eddy would have put him alone at the top of the list all time in terms of championships. It's not going to happen, as Ralph Shaheen said. He'll have to wait for another year. You can bet he'll be back.
There's that battle again, 1st and 2nd position. There apparently is the 1994 American Speed Association national champion for the 3rd time in his career. 1987, 1988, 1994. And Ralph is with his crew chief.
Well, Gary, congratulations. You guys, it looks like, have just clinched the 1994 AC-Delco Challenge Series Championship. What have you said to Butch?
Well, we haven't told him that Mike's out yet. We just want him to stay calm. And after the next stop, we're going to tell him to go for the win.
Yeah, when are you going to tell him he's won?
Not till then.
That's some interesting strategy.
Well, I would have to say so, and I think Gary Showalter was having just as difficult a time masking his emotions on the other end of the emotional spectrum. The elation of having clinched a championship. Number 3 for Butch Miller. He's got a long way to go before he crawls up there into the same league with a Mike Eddy with 7 championships. But Butch Miller, after taking a few years away from ASA racing, came back and picked up right where he left off.
That's the real story. The fact that we continue with this race this afternoon. Glenn Allen Jr. has set the pace. Butch Miller still running for position. We'll talk more about Butch Miller and what this is going to mean to him, what it's going to mean to the race team in a little bit.
And now, of course, we have to look at who's going to win this race, and with the news that Gary Showalter is going to inform his driver to go for the win on top of the championship, we could see a real fun afternoon. The electronic scoring system is provided by Gateway 2000. For more information about Gateway 2000 products, and there are lots of them that'll suit your needs, call 1-800-846-2060. That's Gateway 2000, helping us keep track of what's going on up here.
Not much has happened since we left you. Glenn Allen Jr. is out in front, setting the pace and pulling away, it looks like, from the second place car, Gary St. Amant.
Well, I can't wait for the moment when Gary Showalter tells Butch Miller, if he hasn't already figured it out for himself, that Mike Eddy's out of the race. Certainly he spotted that black 88 car parked down there in the infield. And when Butch gets the green light to go for the win, he could be like a madman chugging through this field.
I don't know. Butch just lost a spot to Brad Loney, who's now arm wrestled his way into fourth position, and he now is closed right in behind Brian Refner, who's operating in third. And okay, the championship is settled, but what we haven't talked about for a while is the rookie battle. That is Brian Refner, who is in third position. Dave Sensiba had a poor pit stop the last time, but he is still, I think, well in the lead file. He's about in sixth or seventh position. I think if we were in this race right now, which of course we're not, he might lose that rookie battle, but it is absolutely razor's edge thin between Sensiba and Refner.
12 points difference. That's 4 spots on the racetrack. That's just about how many positions they are apart on the track, talking about Brian Refner and David Sensiba. Day over early for Tony Raines in the 25 car. Huh, Ralph?
Well, we guessed there was some fluids coming out of the back of your car, Tony, but apparently we had the wrong kind of fluid. What was wrong?
Well, we had got the motor a little warm on the pit stop there, and then we were all bunched up on a restart, and I guess it got hot, you know, pushed all the water out, and then it was a rented motor, and wasn't no sense in tearing it up. You know, it was just a disappointing finish to a disappointing year, so, you know, we'll get ready and do it again next year.
Any hints as to what you're going to do next year?
Well, I'm going to be racing, and, you know, I like the sport and a lot of good people, and I got a lot of good people that want to help me and that do help me, and we'll get turned around and we'll get going in the right direction.
I love these politically safe statements, don't you guys?
Yeah, but I will tell you, there's a young man with way too much talent to not be with a contending team. I think that team has the potential. Who really knows what the Gremlins are, but they have been there en masse this season.
Those Gremlins are something that if anybody could actually figure out how to get sort of gremlin repellent or some way of exterminating gremlins, they'd make a lot of money. No rhyme or reason to why bad things happen to good race car teams. Yeah, just as sometimes there's no way to account really for why such good things happen to some teams that don't seem to work that much harder than everybody else. Of course, we know that isn't true.
This is the third place battle between Brian Refner and car number 33, Brad Loney. Here is the 7th place car, number 4 of Dave Sensiba, and he's closing on Scott Hansen. So if he's able to work his way by Hansen, that would put him 6th. Refner currently 3rd. That's 15 points.
Difference is 12.
The difference is 12. It would be Refner's show as of this moment.
It would.
Hey, but we forgot Refner's 5-point bonus for leading a lap.
That made the 12. See,
that made
22.
The 12.
He got 5 for the pole. He got 5 more for leading a lap. That made it 12. That's where we are right now.
I just wanted to see if you were paying attention. I guess you were.
I tell you, if
for a change.
Yeah. One thing for sure is that we could throw the 8-point difference between Mike Eddy and Butch Miller right out the window. We would have to say that while it's not official, it certainly is very real that Butch Miller has clinched the championship that he has led from the very beginning of the season right here because of Mike Eddy's early retirement from the race. There's David Sensiba, who must have gotten the word that he needs to pick up a couple of spots on the racetrack, and he's heading up towards the part of the track that Brian Refner is occupying.
Cornered these two yesterday, speaking of course of Sensiba and Refner, and I said, hey guys, why don't you just shake on it right now instead of 40,000 to one of you, winner take all, 20 grand apiece. They looked at me, they looked at each other, grinned, and both of them shook their head no simultaneously.
Said they also had to consult the car owners who would have something to say about it. You can bet that those guys just a couple of spots removed from the actual battle on the racetrack would have nothing to do with splitting that prize. It's winner take all, and that's the way it should be.
And we're looking for Brian Refner in car number 5, who's just had a flawless day thus far. Led early, for a while fell out of the top 5, but now he's running in 3rd position, and look at him at war with Brad Loney in car number 33. And I think Refner showing that discretion is the better part of valor in this case is, wait a minute, I'm not going to lose the rookie battle right here. And he moves over and gives the driver just a little more experience. the edge in third position, and Loney is now closing very quickly in on Gary St. Amant. Meanwhile, Glenn Allen Jr. is a full straightaway ahead of this second-place battle.
And running in no traffic right now. Glenn Allen Jr. finding an easy way of it, just holding on to a nice steady lead. He's approaching the back end of the field right now, while Gary St. Amant finds his way around the number 10, the borrowed number 10 of Tony Roper there on the inside. Roper driving Butch Miller's backup car and putting his own number 10 on it after the altercation yesterday in the last chance race.
Well, we don't have a chance right at the moment to talk to Bud St. Amant, but I think if we did, we might hear him say they've gone a little too far the other direction. Early in the race, the car was pushing, and now it's very apparent that it is extremely loose. That is not the case for the CarQuest Pontiac of Glenn Allen Jr., who's motoring around right on the bottom groove of the racetrack. Nobody else able to do it at this point except the car now challenging Gary St. Amant for second position, Brad Loney, who was right alongside momentarily. And again, we look at Sensiba.
There's Dave Sensiba, and Ralph is down in the pit with the crew chief, the number 4 car.
That would be Bill McGowan. Bill, you got to get him on the hook, get him running. What do you got to do to the car, or get him up front?
Well, we had a flat left rear tire, and we were lucky for that last yellow. So right now we're just trying to make up ground. Car's all right. Waiting for one more yellow to catch up. I think we'll be in good shape.
Well, there's the word and some news on Dave Sensiba's situation. Flat left rear tire. That was why they had some problems there. There's Glenn Allen Jr. in the number 15 CarQuest machine. He has found an easy way around this racetrack and is doing a masterful job of navigating it and letting everybody else try to catch up from behind. But in the battle now for third, it is Gary St. Amant and Brian Reffner, because young Brad Loney in the number 33 Winnebago Flex Steel machine has set sail after Glenn Allen Jr. finally dispensing with Gary St. Amant and Reffner to leave them battle among themselves.
I talked with Brad yesterday and just told him I thought the only flaw in their program, the only fly in the ointment for this team this year, has been maybe some poor judgment on timing of pit stops. Their stops themselves have been good, but they've been a little suspect on calling those stops. They have been flawless thus far today. Maybe I gave him some good advice.
Young team, though. You got to give these guys an opportunity to make some mistakes and learn from them. Once again, we said the average age of the entire Loney team is 28 years of age, and they really have a lot of good things to talk about when this season is all over, and a super job they have done so far this year. Perhaps $28,000 stars in the eyes of Brad Loney. We'll have to wait and see. Right now, upon request, Ralph Shaheen is with Bud St. Amant.
Well, it looks like your setup, Bud, isn't right just yet. Where is it now?
Pardon, I didn't hear you.
I said it looks like your setup isn't right just yet. Where is it now?
The car's still too tight, so I guess we're going to have to try something else. Stagger didn't help us too much that time.
So what do you do? What do you try next?
Well, we might put a couple of rounds in the right rear to loosen it up a little bit.
Well, make sure you don't ask Rob Albright, because he's figuring it's going the other way.
Well, I hope he's right.
Oh, come on, Bud.
Gotcha.
You're as bad as Drebber trying to make me look bad. Now, I watched this car, and I've watched it lap after lap, and unlike earlier where it was climbing nose first into the banking and the turns, now this time it looks like the tail is just a little bit happy. Okay, so I'm wrong. I'd still like to talk to Gary and get that confirmed.
We're just guessing up here, and apparently Bud St. Amant is too. My dad always taught me, son, do something, even if it is wrong. That may be what they're about to try to do to Gary St. Amant's car. In the meantime, he's running third.
Between Brian Drebber, my broadcast buddy in crime, and our executive producer, John Petrie. I think it was you, Drebber, that brought the table and chairs to the meeting. This is one way to get the upper hand to control the discussion for your salary demands for 1995.
Well, now, John is sitting in what is now the director's chair for Ed Collins. We call him Little Ed. He's taken over directorial duties this week, making his debut. Our regular director, Gary Clem, is not with us, and we want to say hi to Gary wherever you are. We're having a great time without you there, pal. Wish you were here. We also want to say hi to Chad Myers, the weatherman, who works with Ralph Shaheen down on pit row. Chad has just taken a new job in Detroit, so race fans in the Motor City, you've got a race fan doing the weather for you there on WXYZ in the Motor City.
Hey, I think Ed's doing a pretty decent job for his debut here today, too.
Certainly is. We're seeing pictures of race cars, and they seem to resemble the ones that we've been watching all season long.
That's right, and the leader is in heavy traffic. And look back out, because that may mean that Brad Loney will have an opportunity to close, though Brad has not shown the ability to do that. Still about a straightaway advantage that Glenn Allen has over the second-place car of Brad Loney.
Gary St. Amant has pulled back a lot closer to Brad Loney than he was a while ago. It looked like Loney was off and running and gone, heading for Glenn Allen Jr. Glenn Allen Jr. in traffic right behind Bob Seneker there in the Bluebird number 84. They try to work their way around Harold Fair. Harold dropping down a little bit low there as Glenn shows him the outside. And right now in the rookie situation, Brian Reffner with enough spots on the racetrack, if the race ended right now, in those famous fatal words, to win the rookie title by 3 points, but David Sensiba is on the forward move.
And I believe that Bob Seneker, who has been back on the lead lap, is now once again about to go a lap down to the guy that put him a lap in arrears earlier, Glenn Allen Jr.
Glenn Allen Jr. leading the race in the number 15 CarQuest Pontiac, a sponsorship that he picked up midway through the season, and looking for his second win of the year.
Brad Loney, car number 33 in second place, right in front of Gary St. Amant, and I'm finally going to concede that Bud St. Amant was right. Gary's line now indicates that that car still is pushing a little bit. Well, Brad Loney has only been in this series for a couple of years, and he's got a relatively rookie crew chief, and Ralph is with him.
Well, we got a yellow coming out right now, Greg. What you got to do to this car now?
We're going to keep it the same. It's running great. The H&W Winnebago Chevrolet is just running great. We hope to bring home a win today.
That's Greg Manhart, crew chief for, of course, Brad Loney, and we're going to stay right down here and watch their pit stop.
Well, he didn't want to talk for long, but he sure did make sure that we understood which car it was and what they were going to do. Greg taking off there to assume duties as pit stops are about to happen here for quite a few of the cars. It'll be interesting now. Oh, look at this. Tom Harrington for no good reason there. Well, he's trying to get around behind the wall. Apparently, he's going to call it a day.
I think that was the reason for our caution. And again, lest you think we're not paying attention, that is out of our eyesight. Our broadcast booth is directly adjacent to a suite. They've got a big pad up in front of us, and we really can't see any of turns 3 and 4 at all, unless we happen to catch it on the monitor.
Well, we count on Ed Collins and the hard-working crew here and the Group 5 television sports guys. I mean, they are the best. And even if we had a solid wall in front of us, I know that the camera guys and the folks in the truck have been giving us the great pictures that they have. We depend on the same pictures that you do at home to watch the Jennerstown Speedway and the Pennsylvania 400. Once again, Brad Loney's pit, a sign of activity, and Ralph's there.
Well, gentlemen, I'm watching the windshield on Brad Loney's crew as they're trying to clean the car windshield. A lot of oil up there as Brad took on 2 right-side tires. Now, we're not sure really where all that's from. Greg, let me ask you real quick. Greg Manhart, crew chief for Brad Loney. There looked like there was a lot of oil on the windshield and on the hood of the car. What is that from?
He says a lot of cars are throwing oil today.
And is that causing him a problem vision-wise?
Well, it's hard to see, but he's kind of used to it.
Now, that'll really become a problem off of turns 3 and 4 because that is where the sun will be setting here at Jennerstown. So if a driver's going to have a problem, it's going to be coming to the checkered flag.
Well, and the drama continues to build with 282 laps completed, 118 to go. The championship is decided. It's Butch Miller's, but the rookie battle continues. Dave Sensiba, a faster pit stop than Brian Reffner, and he once again has reassumed command of the rookie points lead.
Just like that, David Sensiba undoes the damage that Brian Reffner has built for 282 laps, and they're going to be going for it when we come back. Drop of the green flag just moments ago. Glenn Allen Jr. maintains the lead, but Butch Miller must have gotten the go-ahead and the green flag from his pit crew saying, okay, you've got the championship in the bag. Now you can look like a real hero and win the final race of the season to top it all off. So Butch Miller trying to get up there and join Glenn Allen Jr. to contend for the victory here that is just 114 laps away.
And Brian, Gary St. Amant's problems have intensified in car number 7. He was second on the restart. He's already given up several spots. Miller gets by, Sensiba gets by, as does Loney. Lap cars going by, and Gary may have a flat tire. I think he may have cut a tire. I would expect to see him on pit road very, very quickly if we don't shortly go back to yellow.
Well, Bud St. Amant was trying to guess what to do, and you were second guessing him, and I said do something even if it's wrong. Apparently it was, unless Gary's just trying to get those tires scuffed in a little bit. It's not working. I mean, 2-3 laps he ought to be doing just fine, and he is just heading backwards through a revolving door like he's got the brakes on.
Scott Hansen goes by, Todd Forbes goes by as 7 cars remain on the lead lap. Glenn Allen Jr. leads, and he's motoring away from Butch Miller. Dave Sensiba is to third now in car number 4, stronger as the day wears on. 4th is Brad Loney. In 5th position is Brian Reffner. 6th is Scott Hansen. 7th is car number 07, Todd Forbes. I said 7 cars, 8 cars on the lead lap. Gary St. Amant, and he's on the tail end of that lead file.
Well, let's go down to the pit and get another report on Gary's situation.
Well, Bud, what's the problem now?
Well, he hadn't said a whole lot. Just he said to hang on a few laps there and see if he can figure out what the real problem is. I'm not real sure yet.
Do you think it's a handling problem or a motor problem?
Yeah, it's a handling problem right now.
Rob, want to guess?
No, thank you. What I will tell you for certain, though, I can do that, is that in 9th position, a lap down, is Tom Jones. 10th is car number 90, Kent Stauffer. That's always where we expect to see him, somewhere hovering around the top 10. In 11th position, Harold Fair. 12th is Steve Holzhausen, car number 78. 13th is Dennis Lampman in car number 9. So 11th through, or I should say 9th through 13th, 1 lap down. And 14th is Jeff Neal, 2 laps off the pace. 15th, 3 laps down, is Jay Sauter. And we've got a problem. Larry Zent is spinning in turn 4, bringing out another caution. And Gary St. Amant has to be saying, thank you, Lord, for that one.
Thank you very much, Lord. Larry Zent in the 05 car. He did a 360 and kept right on going. Barely even came to a stop. But Roger Slack has the caution flag waving at 293 laps, so we are going to take another cut away from the action. We expect about 100 laps of racing when you come back to join us here at Jennerstown Speedway for the Pennsylvania 400. Without any muss and fuss, let's go down to Ralph Shaheen in the Gary St. Amant pit.
Well, there's a lot of activity down there. Apparently it was not the handling. It was somewhere in the motor. Now, Bud is talking to Gary. They brought him in and checked all the plug wires, and apparently that was. Let's see if Don Schrock can tell us anything. Don, any idea where the problem is?
I wish I knew.
That'll tell you. It is a guessing game down here right now. They're probably going to be bringing Gary back in a minute, mess with the motor a little bit more, and see if they can get it to work properly.
So you guys have been picking on me for being wrong. Even the crew chief doesn't always know.
Well,
I'm vindicated.
It doesn't make any sense to me, and yet I've grown to accept it over the years, how a mechanical device can be so baffling. It should behave in absolutely predictable ways, and yet anyone that's owned a car, worked on a car, driven one, or even raced one knows that that is not the case.
Yeah, certainly not the case here. As Gary St. Amant has brought that Quinn Sports City Ford Thunderbird on pit road for yet another time. They're going to put the jack under the left side and get that up. Maybe change some left side tires.
Yeah.
I don't know. And,
don't use more force. Get a bigger hammer.
Yeah.
They're just banging on it with a ball peen hammer now, trying to. Now I know what they're doing right there. They're thinking that maybe they got a float stuck or something, and they're tapping on the side of the carburetor, trying to unstick a float. It could be flooding. It could be starving for fuel. One or the other.
You sure?
I think so. There's that hammer. Either that, or they're just doing a Maxwell silver hammer treatment on it there.
I was trying every other tool in the
Let's just beat on it with a hammer.
What are we going to do now? Without that hammer.
Do something. Just do something. That's what you get paid for. Let's have Ralph ask what's going on there with that little hammer.
All right, Don. Brian Drever up there is trying to play engine mechanic. What are you doing with the little hammer?
We think we got a fuel problem. The carburetor is overflowing, and it's just up at too much fuel. We're going to have to change carburetors or something. We're probably pretty well done for the day.
So with the hammer, you trying to knock anything loose in there? Is that the story?
Yeah, I was trying to beat on the floats here to try to break them loose. Thought maybe that might help it a little bit. But the Winsport Thunderbird just had a bad day today.
Driver, you're a winner.
I'll tell you, the Win Sport City Ford Thunderbird had a pretty good day there for a while. And there's another one of those gremlin things popping its ugly head up there to fight them and bite them. And we go back to green flag racing with just about 100 to go. That's the way we promised, and we're going to deliver now 100 laps of racing to the end of the championship event for the ASA for 1994. And up front, we got 3 young drivers battling for the victory here today. The championship is already in the bag. The rookie battle still very much up for grabs. And David Sensiva seems to have retaken command of that rookie situation.
And I just realized something that I'd forgotten about. We've said that Brad Loney had the best shot at winning in a Chevrolet. What is car number 4? That is a Chevy, and look at Sensiva working to the high side of Glenn Allen Jr., and suddenly the CarQuest Pontiac is maybe a little bit off the pace, maybe a lot off the pace. Sensiva leads this race. What a way it would be to win the rookie championship. Did he cross the start-finish line ahead of Glenn Allen Jr.? I'm not sure. If he did, that's 5 additional bonus points. This time through turn number 4, he's got enough of an edge. I think he will definitely lead Glenn to the start-finish line. What a dramatic change of events here.
David Sensabaugh, where he looked like he was on the mat a while ago, has now padded his lead in that Pat Schauer Memorial Rookie of the Year competition that is worth $40,000 to the champion. And to that $28,000 if David Sensabaugh can get his Chevy Lumina across the finish line in 100 laps or so. And we're talking about a serious major payday for the young driver there in the number 4 car.
What the heck is going on with Glenn Allen Jr. in car number 15? I mean, he slowed rather dramatically. He's always had a car. This team has seemed to be the kind of team that sets a car up for long green flag runs and is a little bit maybe out of sync on restarts. And now we're seeing him start to reassert himself in car number 15, or maybe, I don't know about this. Now, he lives in Coopersville, Michigan, and Dave Sensabaugh lives in Grand Rapids. They're neighbors. Do you think their crew chiefs were in cahoots?
I'll tell you what I think. David pulled up alongside Glenn, rolled the window down, and hollered over there and said, "Glenn, slow down!"
Well, at any rate, Glenn Allen is once again out in front, though the margin is only a couple of car lengths. And if he is capable of pulling away, he's making it look good right now. Ralph, take the mystery out of this for us, would you?
Well, apparently everything is okay with the car. I talked to crew chief Chris Bradley, and it's just one of those things. He got around him, and now they're back up there and going after it. So maybe just a little hiccup. Wow.
Sounds pretty political to me.
Well, you didn't see Chris jogging down towards the Sensabaugh's pit, did you, down there, Ralph? Well, that's an unanswered part of the question yet. No, I don't think that was the case. I'm going to stick with my story that Dave was yelling out the window there, driving down the freeway, telling Glenn to slow down. "I need a lap there, buddy. Come on, let's do it for the home team." And now, in the meantime, little Glenn Allen Jr. putting a lap on Gary St. Amand, who was contending for the lead in his first victory of the season. Now quickly the tide has turned for the driver of the number 7 car.
Seriously disappointing for Gary St. Amand, who was such a factor all day, as now Sensabaugh sails past, and Brad Loney will do it in car number 33.
Well, the old sneaker has managed to sneak back in there too. Number 84, Bob Seneker, and the Bluebird there has crept up into 4th spot on the racetrack.
I'm not convinced that he's not a lap down. Remember, just before we went to caution, Glenn Allen had gotten back around him another time, so I believe that Seneker is a lap down.
I did say on the racetrack, so he's in there following Brad Loney around the track. Brad leaving a comfortable distance, perhaps not by choice, between himself and David Sensabaugh, who has really got that Chevrolet hooked up, chasing the Pontiac of Glenn Allen Jr.
Now trying to get reconfirmation from scoring. We know at one point Seneker did make up his lap, and now we are being told since he stayed out under the most recent caution, he is back on the lead lap and running in 4th position. And Brad Loney, who prior to the last caution was all over Dave Sensabaugh, now has dropped about 8 or 10 car lengths back. Running in 5th position is Scott Hansen. He has Todd Forbes in tow, who runs in 6th spot. Butch Miller is 7th, and Brian Reffner is all the way back in 8th position. Just like we said early on, Brian, whichever one of these rookies has appeared strongest early doesn't seem to be the strongest as the race progresses. And here again, Reffner was such a force early, and now he's laboring deep in the pack and falling off the pace of the 7th place car number 52 of Butch Miller.
Yeah, but also every time we've tried to stick a fork in one of these guys and say he's done, they've come back and proven us wrong again. And that information on Bob Seneker coming from Mike, who's up here in the booth with us. He is a junior assistant junior know-it-all brother to, of course, Torch and Scorch, who are somewhat physically removed from us here today, but passing information along nevertheless, and we couldn't do it without those guys either.
Well, we were at Toledo 2 weeks ago in a non-televised race. Todd Forbes in car number 07 took a hard right into the wall. Rick Miller has apparently had an engine expire in car number 31. I'm not sure he made contact with anything. We'll wait and see if the caution comes out. But there is Todd Forbes, who has taken 5th position away from Scott Hansen, and now he's going to give up a spot to the lapped car number 90 of Kent Stauffer. So Hansen has things not going his way either in car number 53. He was the guy that was without peer 2 weeks ago at Toledo en route to his first victory of the year. Rick Miller has pulled car number 31 to a stop in the infield. We've got to give this guy credit, a guy who's accustomed to running 30 and 40 lap races here at Jennerstown Speedway. Went 314 laps today, and it was his car that gave up the ghost and not him physically. A good run, and he early on was moving up with Brad Loney.
That was Miller number 3, Rick Miller. Of course, we had Butch, Mike. They've been with us all season long. Rick Miller making his first appearance here in the ASA, and a local driver in the Extrude Home Chevrolet talked to the fellows that run that company. They say they are using Rick Miller's automobile as kind of an R&D test bed for a lot of the products that they provide. They do porting and polishing work on engines, any kind of fluid and airflow over parts and stuff. And that's a rolling R&D project, that number 31 car. Well, it just rolled into the infield. We're going to take another cut away from the action here at the Pennsylvania 400. We're getting close to the last 75 laps or so. That's when this one will be decided. Hello again, everybody, from all of us here at Group 5 Sports, and we welcome you back to Jennerstown Speedway in western Pennsylvania for the Pennsylvania 400, the 18th and final race of the 1994 season for the American Speed Association. We seem to have crowned our champion already. He is still out on the racetrack. Butch Miller in the number 52 automobile has led from the beginning of the season. But the leader of this race is number 15, Glenn Allen Jr. It's been a long drought since his first and only victory this season in that number 15 automobile.
Glenn Allen won earlier at I-70 Speedway in Odessa. And we had a chance to ask Glenn yesterday, are you happy overall with your results in 1994?
I'm really tickled to death. We had a good race car all year long. Best we finished in points so far up to this date going into this race. Hopefully, you know, after the race we can still be fourth in points. And yeah, I mean, we've had 8 top 10s. That's more than I've ever had in my career. Things are going forward. We really had a good year. Just some small, minor, you know, motor problems got us in a little bit of trouble. But besides that, I'm really tickled with the car owner, the crew, and everybody involved.
Things are certainly going well for Glenn Allen Jr. right now. What a great way to end the season with a victory. That would certainly leave the entire Troop Motorsports CarQuest team on a high note going through the silly season it might be for some of the others. But these guys will be able to say, hey, we pulled off a win in the final race of the season. There's no reason why we can't start off with one next year and work towards that goal.
75 laps still remaining. Dave Sensiba not letting Glenn Allen Jr. get out of his gun sights. He stays right behind him, about 4 car lengths. Meanwhile, third place continues to be Brad Loney with about a similar margin over the 4th running Bob Seneker, but they now are a little over a half straightaway behind Glenn Allen Jr.
Well, David Sensiba, as you said, even though we call him a rookie, is an experienced driver, and he is driving very much like a veteran out there right now, just taking care of the car that could very well put him not only into the lead or into the championship as the rookie of the year, but into victory circle for another 28 cool grand in that Chevrolet contingency bonus. Running in second spot, he's a man that could make a lot of money out here today.
Dave Sensiba, the driver of car number 4, like so many drivers in the American Speed Association, cut their racing teeth at Berlin Raceway in Marne, Michigan. Hopefully one of these years we'll get a chance to televise a race from there. So it's a very unusually shaped racetrack, a little bit of elevation change. Everybody that goes there says it's the toughest one on the racing circuit to learn the first time you go there. Brian Reffner was fast there, but crashed trying to qualify. He learned his lesson the hard way first trip to Berlin. But Dave Sensiba is a 2-time champion on that track, and though he's not raced as many different tracks as Reffner has in his brief career, I think that has stood him in good stead this season.
Well, Glenn Allen Jr. found a way around the number 8 car. David Sensiba did as well. And we're going to take another look at Butch Miller, the man who will be the champion of this 1994 season in the Quality Care Liberty Ford Thunderbird. And Ralph Shaheen, some thoughts?
Well, unfortunately for Butch, his radio has been broken ever since Mike Eddy went out of the race. So unless Butch has been able to catch a glimpse of Eddie's car sitting off on the side, he doesn't know he's champion as we have a spin in turn 4 and a yellow flag out.
Fort Wayne Foundry Chevrolet of Larry Zent, car number 05, spun there a little bit earlier. That right in front of Brad Loney and Bob Seneker.
And Butch Miller, who had a little bit of trouble getting between the rear end of the 05 car and the end of pit road. Right there you can see now as Larry Zent makes his way into the infield, he left just a little more than the width of a car, and Butch Miller, with a moment of indecision, kind of wiggled left right, decided to go up high around Larry Zent, but then saw that he did have enough room and just squeezed in between the end of the pit road wall and the car of Larry Zent.
Well, you were so astute on your call of Gary St. Amont's problems with the hammer and the fuel situation as we look at this time Butch Miller going through that spin by Larry Zent down in turn number 4. and he's hard on the binders, elects which way.
And here's the situation. He sees a car ahead of him, and he almost ducked down pit road there, but then thought better of it and managed to squeeze through, as Larry Zent did a good job to keep his car in the same position and not back down into the cars that were trying to squeeze through. There is Larry Zent's automobile. It won't take a whole lot to figure out what's wrong with that car. It's broke.
Yeah, it sure is. And several others are a little bit, maybe not broken, but have minor problems. And let's see who likes to come on pit road. That's what I was going to ask you, to kind of make your prediction on who came in. Glenn Allen stays out.
Better.
So does Dave Sensiba and Brad Loney. They're going to try to run this thing to the checker, as will Bob Seneker. None of them willing to relinquish position on the racetrack. However, Butch Miller, Scott Hansen, who gets a quick stop, is out. Brian Refner remains in with the rear of the car on the jack. And let me see who else. Todd Forbes was in as well. But your leader, Glenn Allen Jr., along with the second running Dave Sensiba, third and fourth place cars of Brad Loney and Bob Seneker, have all elected to stay on the racetrack.
A chance to take a deep breath here as we eyeball the last 67 laps in this 400-lap championship event, and we'll be right back to finish it all up for you, we hope, after this. We just went green as they go into turn number 1, the flag waving in the hands of Roger Slack. We're going back into the race here now with the car number 15, the CarQuest Pontiac of Glenn Allen Jr. running up front. David Sensiba in the Chevrolet with $28,000 stars in his eyes, and right behind him, Brad Loney with those same stars, because the Chevrolet contingency money would go to them. Glenn Allen Jr. looking for his second victory of the season, and his car is just working so well out there today. Has been all day long.
Certainly has. 4 drivers elected to stay out. The other 4 on the lead lap came in, and we're shortly going to find out who made the right decision. A lot of it will depend, I think, Brian, on if we run the rest of the race green. It's going to be very difficult for anybody to catch Glenn Allen.
Well, Bob Seneker, the veteran driver behind the 3 youngsters who are running up front, I guess we can't really count the Bluebird out of here. He has qualified so well, finally picked up a victory here, turned around a horrible 1993 season to take some measure of success here in 1994. The winningest driver of the American Speed Association, sitting 4th behind this man right here, Glenn Allen Jr.
8 cars on the lead lap. Glenn Allen, Dave Sensiba, Brad Loney's car number 33 is 3rd. Bob Seneker 4th. Scott Hansen after the stop is 5th, followed by Butch Miller, Todd Forbes, and car number 5, Brian Refner. In 9th spot, 1 lap down, is car number 90, Kent Stauffer, also 1 lap down. In 10th is Dennis Lampman. 11th, Harold Fair. 12th, Tom Jones. 13th, 2 laps off the pace, is car number 48, Joe Knott. 14th is car number 78, Steve Holtzhausen. 15th, 3 laps down, car number 71, A.J. Cooper, followed by Jay Sauter, Gary St. Amant, Eddie Sharp, car number 8, Carl James, and the 12 of Steve Mergic. Those cars all at least 3 laps off the pace.
Glenn Allen Jr. leads David Sensiba, who leads Brad Loney, and Bob Seneker 5th on the racetrack. Mike Miller, of course, he's a whole bunch of laps down after changing 2 engines and making 1 engine out of the 2 that he had to take out of the race car. He's back there behind Bob Seneker. But here is Brian Refner alongside Todd Forbes. Refner trying to get back into it here. It's still not over. We're over 50 laps to the finish of this race, but time running out for Brian Refner after it looked so good for him early. Sat on the pole, led the race to pick up 5 points. Of course, that was negated when Sensiba led laps of his own and erased the 5 that Refner picked up. And now Brian Refner having trouble, buried back in the field there behind Todd Forbes in 8th spot, while Sensiba runs 2nd behind Glenn Allen.
And there is that top 8, all on the lead lap. As we mentioned, Kent Stauffer, Dennis Lampman, Harold Fair, Tom Jones, 1 lap down. And Forbes, for the moment, holds on to that 7th position. Joe Knott is 13th, Steve Holtzhausen, A.J. Cooper 2 laps down, as is Jay Sauter in 16th. 17th through 20th, Gary St. Amant, but he may have dropped a couple more positions. He just came back on pit road. Eddie Sharp, and rounding out the top 20, Carl James and Steve Mergic.
38 cars started this race. 46 came here to qualify, and only 8 or 9 still on the lead lap. And out of those 8 or 9 cars will come not only the winner of this race, but the champion for the season and the rookie of the year. All those contenders still on the lead lap.
This is the best battle. Yeah, the battle last. Yeah, it's kind of late in this broadcast. The best battle on the racetrack continues for 7th position, and it may be that finally Refner has wrestled that spot away from Todd Forbes, and Todd did not make it easy for him.
Got your tongue wrapped around your eye teeth and couldn't see what you were saying there for a minute. Did you all right?
I do that often. Here comes Forbes back on the high side of the racetrack. Refner will now try to use the lap car of Dennis Lampman.
Lampman gets out of the way very courteously. We're seeing a little puff out of the back of the 07 car there on the overrun.
You know, we've seen that all day long. I'm not sure what the problem was, and obviously it's not something they think is dripping onto the racetrack.
Valve guide, oil seal leaking. Something happens when he gets off the gas and pulls a little oil up past the pistons there, maybe up into the top end. So you know a little bit about this stuff.
Yes, you do. I'm amazed. And you've learned a little bit about ASA.
You know how to drive the cars, but I know how to, I know the nuts and bolts parts and stuff. I built a motorcycle from scratch and worked on cars since I was big enough to hold a wrench with my dad.
That probably will entitle you to a special achievement award at the banquet this year.
Never driven one around the racetrack, got to admit.
December the 10th will crown our champion and Rookie of the Year. Yet to be decided is that rookie battle as Glenn Allen Jr. continues to motor out in front, and I think without a doubt he has led now, if he hadn't already, the most laps this afternoon in car number 15. It took him quite a while to get there, but having gotten there, he has been in command.
He's a pretty tough act to follow, and that's just exactly what everybody has to do is follow him around. David Sensiba, second on the track right now, leading the rookie battle going into this day, and looked like he was going to lose it there for a while, and did, in fact, early in this race to Brian Refner, but he has retaken charge of that title that he wants for himself, not to mention the opportunity. He still has the opportunity to win this race should Glenn Allen Jr. falter at all in these final 50 laps of the race. That David Sensiba would stand to inherit the lead and the victory as he works his way around John Freeman in the Tioga Pines machine, going another lap down to the leaders.
There is Dave Sensiba. Now we'll look for Brian Refner. Here he comes in car number 5, a little less than half a lap behind Sensiba. What's amazing, Brian, is 3 races into this season, after a 29th place finish at Colorado, a 24th at Columbus, and a 21st while crashing in the lead on television at Toledo, car owner Bud Gavin was almost ready to say, we're not going to win the Rookie of the Year battle. It is a good thing that Dave Sensiba and company talked him into staying, as he followed that up with back-to-back 5th place finishes. His career best came in the Salem 200 back in June. He finished 4th, and he's now trying to improve upon it and drive nails into the Rookie of the Year coffin that Brian Refner now is laying on his back end, but the lid hasn't quite yet been closed.
Not quite. Anything can happen, and we certainly have seen some strange things in this race so far here today. Butch Miller driving around out there, doing a pretty good job of keeping Mike Eddy at bay, and then all of a sudden Mike Eddy's chances go poof. He ends up a pedestrian, now a spectator in the infield, and what shaped up as a great battle for the championship has now gone quite easily to Butch Miller, who's just driven around and ridden around and watched this race from his 3rd place spot on the track right now, 4th place, 5th place on the track right now, actually behind Seneker and Brad Loney. Then we started focusing on the rookie battle, and well, we're not giving that one up for gone yet either. David Sensiba running in 2nd spot on the racetrack. Brian Refner trying to make his way up towards the front. And of course, who's going to win this race? The third and discreet, the third and yet discreet story in this event, having nothing to do with either of the former two.
That was a mouthful.
So I need a rest, is what you're trying to say there, Rob Albright. We'll give the audience a rest, too. I'll shut up for just a few minutes, and you'll listen to somebody else talk to you. We'll be back to pick up the... Here's yet another look at the man who has led more laps than anyone else in this race, the Pennsylvania 400 at Jennerstown Speedway. And as we watch the leader, Glenn Allen Jr., we're also going to take a look all the way back through the field and get set up for the checkered flag here in this 400-lap race and give you a look at your favorite race car driver if he's still out there on the track.
Glenn Allen Jr., amazingly still just 23 years of age, came ASA racing at age 16. Dave Sensiba was about a decade older than that when he started in ASA this year as a rookie. And I'll tell you, he's just, you know, every year we say, how can the rookie crop get any better? Well, it's been kind of a two-man show, but it has been a real battle between Sensiba and Refner all year. Carl James, car number 8 in the Odessa Chevrolet. We haven't seen a whole lot of him. He had anticipated running for Rookie of the Year, but his car owner pulled that machine at about the midpoint of the race, elected to sit out for a while. And there's the 3rd place car, number 33, of Brad Loney. It's looking less and less like he's going to win this one this afternoon, as he's dropped about a half lap back, or a half straightaway back, I should say, but that Winnebago Flex Steel Chevrolet has been a contender.
And there's Bob Seneker in the 84 Bluebird. The sneaker, lapped early in the race, has managed to unlap himself and is just being nudged along by 5th place running Butch Miller, the champion of the 1994 ASA season. We crowned him about 150 laps ago when Mike Eddy retired from the race. And there's Scott Hansen also still on the lead lap, and his car has run very, very well at times in this race. and yet he's not been able to manage to get much further towards the front than he is right now.
He did lead, I think, for a little while, and Scott now, after running very well on the restart, now begins to fade just a little bit. Tom Harrington, well, you can see for yourself, challenge.
Yes, sir.
Well, I know that line by now. And he is a former regular on the ASA circuit. They're just running part-time this season. Going to make it looks like, we hope, to the end this afternoon in car number 91. And there's Mike Miller, your buddy, the guy that probably gave you a better ASA education than anyone. And that team really, I think, is going to have to sit down and try to evaluate what hurt them the second half of the season, because the first half, they were a force, and they were second in points at one.
It's just been a total mystery to them. They seem to have a pretty good program. They've got a good crew of experienced guys. And here's Todd Forbes in the 07 car, the Noah Yoder machine. We have already recounted that he was in the hospital a couple of weeks ago, and he had a big hitch in his get-along out here on pit road all weekend, too. He's still not 100%, but, boy, he's run well in that car today.
Really hard on the left side. Joe Knott, 22 years of age, one of the future superstars of ASA, and the Raby Knott, Alan Knott Honda Ford Thunderbird.
That's a
Honda
mouthful.
Ford Thunderbird. Well, they own a Ford Honda dealership, that's why. And there's the guy that at the beginning of this race we thought probably was going to end up the Rookie of the Year based on his practice and qualifying runs of yesterday. Boy, have we been so wrong on these two guys all year long.
Ken Stauffer in the 9-0 machine, running, of course, in the top 10, as we have come to expect. A very steady performer in the American Speed Association. There's Jay Sauter. A lot of hope coming into this race, I think, for Jay in the #1 car. And just around the outside works Dennis Lampman in his #9 machine. Dennis has had flashes of brilliance this season, too. Has done really well a few times. But, boy, there's another guy that's been bit by some serious bad luck in races. He has not been able to perform well and up to his own standards.
Steve Murgic, we've only seen him in one other ASA race, runs in the ARTGO series, I believe, predominantly in the Michigan and Wisconsin area. Really don't know a lot about this racing team. Wonder if it might not be a force for Rookie of the Year next year. They seem to have spent a lot of money getting to the few races that they've been to. And here's last year's winner, Tom Jones. Not going to happen again today for Tom, but he still had a pretty decent day. 1 lap down, showing in 10th position. A.J. Cooper qualified so well in the first third of this race, ran on the lead lap. 16th isn't too bad, but if it doesn't go to Brad Loney, this would probably be my second place choice for most improved in the 1994 season.
As we look back into the field, we find a lot of white automobiles, and there's one we looked at in victory lane for the first time, and a very happy Steve Holtzhausen picking up his first win in this 1994 season. That's Tony Roper in a car that looks very much like, and in fact is, an identical replica of Butch Miller's #52 automobile. He's driving the #10, his own car damaged, and we are back now to the lead as Glenn Allen Jr. has taken us all the way around the racetrack for one complete full tour of the field. He leads this race with 24 laps remaining.
I think we did miss a couple of cars. Eddie Sharp in car number 50. We mentioned earlier a protege of Butch Miller going to run for Rookie. And we missed Dave Anspaugh in car number 37 in that LA Vans machine. He's pretty excited about that sponsorship this weekend, hoping he can parlay that into something significantly more for all of 95.
We also, John Freeman, the #16 car, the Tioga Pines machine. He's still circling the track out there. And while he started near the back of the field, has always been present, always been in the race, and he's learning fast here in the ASA for 1994.
I think we also missed Gary St. Amand, who's just very slowly around the bottom of the racetrack. Was one of the leaders in the first 3/4 of this race. Now with that fuel pickup problem, that carburetor problem, has dropped well off the pace. And car number 81, Harold Fair, I'm not sure that we talked about him. Teammate to Alec Pinsino, who crashed so hard with Tony Roper in that last chance race yesterday.
Randy Larson also in the 02 machine, the bright yellow car that we have seen on occasion during the course of the race. Randy running, of course, as a rookie in that Tony's Pizza Pabst Blue Ribbon entry. He's still out there on the racetrack. And the only Oldsmobile running in the American Speed Association for 1994.
Now I know what it must feel like when you win an Academy Award and you get up there and you hope you remember everybody. I think we got them all.
And on that note, we're going to take another pause from the action here as we set up the final 20 laps of this 400-lap championship. It's not over till it's over, somebody famous once said. So showing on the board here in the Pennsylvania 400, and if a late move is going to be made, it's going to start happening right now. There is still the odd chance for a handful of drivers to win this race and to end the 1994 season on a high note. But Glenn Allen Jr. is trying to do the best he possibly can to make sure that those odds are long indeed. As he is running up into traffic right now, only David Sensiba really is within reach of the victory by Glenn Allen.
Here are a couple of real ASA veterans dueling for 4th position. Bob Seneker has managed to fend off the challenges of Butch Miller over the last 15 or 20 laps, as well as Scott Hansen. as these three Ford Thunderbirds have run right together on the racetrack. Again, we remind you that Seneca was the only one of this threesome that did not come in during the last caution period. However, lest we throw darts at Butch and say that was a mistake coming in, or Bob rather, for not coming in, Glenn Allen made obviously the right choice as he's motored away since the restart in car number 15.
Allen Jr. leading comfortably right now, although David Sensiba is making a run at him and using some traffic to do it. Glenn Allen's got to be looking in the mirror and seeing him come, while three Fords are fighting for third, fourth, and fifth. We got a Pontiac and a Chevy dueling it out up front, although there are about 20 car lengths in between and a car as well.
Actually, this is for fourth, fifth, and sixth with the Chevrolet Brad Loney still by himself in third position. He's been kind of quiet of late, about a half straightaway back of Dave Sensiba's second place car, but a similar margin ahead of. And Butch Miller gets caught in traffic behind Gary St. Amant and relinquishes that fifth position to Scott Hansen, who will now put some heat on car number 84, Bob Seneca.
Butch Miller, the season champion, now moves back to sixth place. Side by side go Scott Hansen and Bob Seneca racing for fourth place. Seneca with the inside groove. And up front, it's still Glenn Allen Jr., David Sensiba, and Brad Loney. Three young drivers motoring along while the veterans are fighting for the scraps behind them.
10 laps to go. And this is that point in the race where Dave Sensiba is the guy hearing every noise, just knowing that suddenly that engine is going to grenade or that a wheel's going to fall off or something is going to happen. Probably won't, but you never know.
And at the same time, just trying to just convince himself that if he could make his right foot push a little bit harder, he could go up there and try to win this thing. But I don't know. There might just be a little too much room on the racetrack between David Sensiba and Glenn Allen Jr. And Glenn Allen Jr. hungry for a victory of his own in that 15 Pontiac.
I guess you'd have to say if he did win this one, it would be the biggest payday ever for an ASA driver, in a manner of speaking, because he would lock up the rookie, 40 grand. He'd win 28,000 from Chevy, another, I don't know, 10 or so for winning the race. It would be a $70,000 payday for Dave Sensiba.
Over $170,000 at stake here today in total prize money for this race, the Pennsylvania 400. And as we wind the laps down, we're at 8 to go now. For those of you keeping track and keeping count, there is the man who seems to be poised for victory here in this final event of the 1994 season in the American Speed Association. Glenn Allen Jr., the young driver of the CarQuest number 15, has led more laps than anybody. He obviously had the right setup. Chris Bradley, crew chief of the year 1 year ago for Johnny Benson, has taken some time to get the program together for Glenn Allen Jr., but with a victory at the end of the season, he can call it a successful one, too.
He can, especially if this does, in fact, turn out to be the swan song for Glenn Allen Jr. with this racing team. They hope for a championship this year. You have to feel like if they were able to piece it together and come back in 95, they would be a contender for the title. Fourth isn't going to be bad with just 5 laps to go this afternoon.
5 laps remaining in the 1994 season for the American Speed Association, and for David Sensiba, he will clinch apparently, although as soon as we say something like that, we seem to jinx people, at least they think we do, and the surest way to have something happen is not to talk about it at all, maybe. So David Sensiba just needs to be steady, be calm, be cool, keep that car together. Meanwhile, Brian Reffner doing everything he can to try to come up from behind. There's way too much racetrack for him to catch Sensiba right now.
But Scott Hansen and Butch Miller are giving it all they've got in an effort to catch Brad Loney about 10 car lengths back.
In fact, David Sensiba is a lot closer to the tail end of Brian Reffner's car than Reffner is to the tail end of Sensiba. Sensiba's gone all the way around and could conceivably put a lap on his rookie contender, Brian Reffner. We are down now to 3 laps to go. It'll be 2 when they come by. And Roger Slack, the flag man for the American Speed Association for every event this year that we have televised, is now threatening the field with a pair of checkered flags, and those are the ones that they wanted to see.
3 laps to go, 2 laps to go. The next time by, it'll be the white flag for Glenn Allen Jr., who's worked past that battle for position a lap down, now 2 laps off the pace for Jay Sauter and Kent Stauffer. Here's Roger Slack, that young Canadian flagman, waves the white flag, and now Glenn Allen Jr. is 1 lap from victory, and Dave Sensiba is 1 lap from the rookie title.
The final lap of this long season, 4,214 plus 400, over 4,600 laps of racing are coming to an end.
And Butch Miller has just taken 4th position away from Scott Hansen as Glenn Allen takes the checkered flag. Dave Sensiba finishes 2nd out of turn number 4. It's Loney 3rd, Miller 4th, Scott Hansen 5th. And in 6th position, Bob Seneker. 7th will be Todd Forbes. A valiant effort for Brian Refner, but came up just a bit short, finished on the lead lap, but in 8th position. And Dave Sensiba will be the Rookie of the Year.
The crew of Glenn Allen Jr. will be celebrating, but this is the crew of Butch Miller. The Ford Quality Care Thunderbird driver has brought home a champion from 1994. He won the first race of the season and was never touched in that battle for the championship. Briefly, during one race in Toledo, Mike Eddy had enough points on the racetrack to take the lead figuratively, but the champion will be the number 52 of Butch Miller, alongside David Sensiba, who will be the rookie champion. And there's the winner of the race, number 15, Glenn Allen. We'll take a cut away from the action, give these guys a chance to climb out of the race cars, give you a chance to look at them, talk to them, and meet them up close when we return to Jennerstown Speedway to wrap it up here at the Pennsylvania. Hello again, everybody, at Jennerstown Speedway. The action has died down, but the celebration has not. Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen with the champion.
Well, they're all pouring some champagne and having a big time down here. Hey, you, sir, are the 1994 American Speed Association's AC-Delco Challenge Series champion. Congratulations, Butch Miller. It is your 3rd.
Well, thank you very much. You know, I gotta mention the sponsors, then I'll tell you a little story. You know, Ford Quality Care came with us this year. Terrific sponsor. They gave us a little backing that we needed to get over the hump, and we were able to bring a first-class performance here. Liberty Ford, Port City Racing, all the other sponsors. I can't think of them all right now. But let me tell you, when I first started racing, I mean back, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, when it was time for the day of the race, I couldn't eat. Guess what happened this morning? I couldn't eat anything. I'm starved.
Well, tell me about the battle on the racetrack between you and Mike Eddy. Mike never seemed to be able to get his handling right properly, and then it went away. Did you know when he fell out of the race?
Well, our radios went dead, and it took him about 50 laps for him to tell me that I could hear, but I couldn't talk back. But, you know, Mike might have been off, but we had an ugly race car today, too. It wasn't wanting to keep up for nothing, you know, and it was its best at the end. Still not strong enough for Glenn Allen and the 4 car and the 33. And Scott Hansen gave us a good, tough fight. I don't know, I might have bumped him on the last lap, but I was excited. I'm sorry, Scott.
Tell me about the 3rd championship. How does that rank with the other 2?
It ranks right up there. I mean, it's more important than the other 2. First off, it's a brand new team. You know, all these guys, none of them have ever won it, so it's all their first. And, you know, I'm getting up there. I've got, you know, maybe tops 15 years left, you know. These championships are coming harder and harder and harder, you know. And I'm looking forward to some more, but this is an important one because who knows if it's ever going to happen again.
Is this an opportunity for Butch Miller to make a statement to the rest of the racing community that, hey, I am back after the trip down south and coming back to the ASA series? Does this allow you to stand up and say, hey, I really am here?
Well, you know, I can't say I, because this certainly was a team effort. I mean, from Gary Showalter, David, Bob, I mean, Chris Showalter, our tire man, he kept us in the right tire. It's a team effort, so we're back.
4th and 95?
Yes, sir.
Butch Miller, the 1994 American Speed Association AC-Delco Challenge Series champion.
You know, he didn't make it easy. Last win came in the Brainerd Pontiac 300 back on June 26th, Brian, of this year.
On a road course, nevertheless. It's been a long time between victories for Butch Miller. He didn't get one here today, but he wrapped up the championship. We'll be back with more right after this. The brawl in the fall for it all, and, well, all could be attributed to Butch Miller for taking the championship. But a little piece of the spotlight has to belong to the man that won this race. And it's been a while since he won one as well. And right now we're going to go back down to Ralph Shaheen with another special guest. And this time it's a good thing.
Well, that would be Glenn Allen Jr. And a tough race out there today. In fact, you had a real tough battle with Gary St. Amant. Tell me about that.
I'll tell you what, we had a good race. I set my car up to work on the bottom. This Port City race car just handled so well on the bottom. We worked all day yesterday to make the car work on the bottom, and Gary worked all day to work on the high side, and we just kept knocking along. I mean, this CarQuest, I mean, the Pontiac just ran good. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything any better. I mean, the longer we ran, the better the car got. And, you know, CarQuest jumping on board, this is our first win with them. They jumped on halfway during the season where we already had a win, and we had some motor problems, kept knocking us down, and to come back fighting here at the end and trying to keep alive for the winter, we had a really good run. I mean, my guys gave me a super race car.
Tell me a little bit then about next year as you're looking towards 1995. This is the last race of the year. This win with CarQuest has got to help some.
Yeah, it really does. You know, we don't know if we're going to race next year with, you know, with Leroy Troop. We don't know if we're going to do it, and it's just great to win with CarQuest and to win last time with Leroy. I hope I'm back here next year doing the same thing. I tell you, I got a super bunch of guys that give me great race cars. I got a great sponsor. I got a great owner. I can't ask for anything any better.
Well, was there any hiccups in there at all today?
Nothing. I mean, this thing ran super. I mean, I couldn't ask for anything any better. The longer we went, the better it got. I just kept digging. I've been fast here the last 3 years, and I've gotten myself in trouble at lap 300 leading the race, and I never made the last. So I just started out slowly today and just kept ticking along, guys, shortly and shortly. I think the Fords were fast earlier because the carburetor and the cars really hooked up to the racetrack, but the longer we went, the less they could use their horsepower, the better. We just kept knocking our way through.
How much of a problem was the air gun for you?
Well, I don't know. I just heard it going, just running all over the place. The guys are trying to catch. I mean, we came in leading, we come out 4th or 5th. That's okay. I mean, we're going to make mistakes. I make mistakes on the racetrack. The hose busted. Nothing nobody can do. We just kept digging, and that was just something that happened.
Glenn Allen Jr., the winner of the Pennsylvania 400 at Jennerstown.
And it's good to see that young race car driver back in victory circle. And as for the future, well, only he knows, and perhaps even he doesn't know just quite yet. So we have already talked to the champion. We have already talked to the race winner. We still have more to do, and we'll be right here. Victor, go the spoils. There's the trophy, and there's Miss Wins to help celebrate the victory for Glenn Allen Jr., for the Troop Motorsports Racing Team, and for CarQuest. And here's a full rundown. Behind Glenn Allen Jr. is David Sensiba. We'll be talking to him in a few minutes. Brad Loney, great finish for that young driver. And then the veterans, Butch Miller and Scott Hansen, leading the parade behind the three youngsters.
Bob Seneca, along with several other drivers, elected to stay out after the last caution. It cost him a couple of positions. Also finishing on the lead lap were Todd Forbes and Brian Reffner. 9th, one lap down, was Kent Stauffer. Last year's winner of this race, Tom Jones, finishes 10th, a lap in arrears, and car number 0.
And for Brian Reffner, oh, what might have been. There's Dennis Lampman in the number 9 car. He had a very bad day that turned a little bit better, finishing just out of the top 10 ahead of Joe Nod. Harold Fair in the number 81 car. There's Steve Holtzhausen. Of course, we were just reminiscing a little bit about 400 out of 400 laps for his victory this year. Steve Holtzhausen finishes 14th today, one spot ahead of Jay Sauter in the number 1 car.
And Jay, a question mark for 1995 and what he might be doing. A good run for A.J. Cooper. He hoped for better after a very strong qualifying run. Eddie Sharp, the guy who was, well, kind of marking himself as a contender for Rookie of the Year next year. Carl James, Steve Mergic, some unfamiliar names there, 17th through 19th. And Tony Roper in Butch Miller's backup car, Soldiers to 20th.
And looking a little bit further down, Gary St. Amant led the race early and then found himself back with Mike Miller, who lost 13, 15, 18 laps at the very beginning of the race after changing a couple of engines over the weekend, trying to make one good engine out of 2 bad ones. Managed to get into 22nd spot. Randy Larson, good finish for him in the Tony's Pizza entry. David Ansbaugh, good finish for David there with his new sponsor. And John Freeman in the Tioga Pines machine brings that one home into 25th spot.
26th through 30th position, Larry Zent, who found himself headed the wrong direction a couple of times in turn number 4. The local driver, Rick Miller, who had a good run before having the engine expire somewhere around lap 320 or so. Jeff Neal in car number 75 will be back for the full season in that car next year. Tom Harrington and Tony Range had another engine problem for the driver of car number 25, credited with 30th finishing position.
38 cars started this race, and we mentioned 46 came to race. There's Mike Eddy. Of course, the championship hopes for an 8th title went seriously awry halfway through this race when his engine gave up the ghost. Russ Gamester also involved in an altercation early, retired early. Kevin Sawinski, we saw him parked against the wall along with Bill Baird and Ted Smokestad. These are guys that weren't running at the end of the race, but they were here. They came to race. That just didn't turn out well for them.
Ted Smokestad, of course, showing the Jacob's Hope decal on the front. His young cousin, Jacob Wetterling, was abducted some 5 years ago, and the family still not giving up hope on finding him. The doctor, Yale Conley, finishing 36th after a collision early in the race. Tim Steele was out early in car number 85. Tim, a former ASA regular, may be back in the fold for 1995. And the third-ranked rookie that we didn't give a lot of attention to this year, he had a good year, didn't have a particularly good day, 38th position, car number 61, Tracy Schuler.
So that's the full field rundown, and while you may not be satisfied with where your favorite driver finished, you certainly have to be happy that we have come to the end.